Good morning and welcome to the January 29th special meeting of council. The city of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. So I'll be filling in for the moment here and until we have the mayor back. But let's get going with the agenda here. We can get started on the consent agenda. We've got the meetings of the special committee of the whole meeting held December 11th, 2023. And the meeting minutes of the special committee of the whole meeting held the 24th of January, 2024, and the approval of the council meeting agenda. Do we have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Martin. Any discussion or errors or omissions on those items? All right, seeing none, then we will call the vote here. All in favor? Thank you. All right, we have a delegation. Let's invite the Oceanside Minor Baseball Association up to the hot seat here. Good morning. You have 10 minutes for your presentation today, and you're both welcome to have a seat there. There are two hot seats.
There we go. It's good. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Mayor, Council, thank you for receiving us. My name is Rob McGorman, and I'm the president of Oceanside Minor Baseball, representing our association today. I'm a local developer and builder, and I've lived in Parksville my entire life. With my 50 years in Parksville, 22 years I've been a part of Oceanside Minor Baseball. Oceanside Minor Baseball consists of 350 youth players, ranging from ages 6 to 18 years old, and from over 320 local families. We had originally arranged this time to come before council to discuss some future projects at Springwood Park, such as enclosing the batting cage so it could be an indoor facility, as well as starting the process or discussion on getting lights on the main baseball field. But after some recent events, we're having to shelve those discussions for now. At this point, I'd like to pass you off to Mike.
Sure, let's do this. There we go. Good morning. My name is Mike Parlow. I'm the general manager and executive director for the Parksville Royals. I'm one of five volunteer members of the executive committee. For some background, OMBA is here in its 44th year in the community. Parksville Royals we're in our 30th season. For those who were not aware, the Royals were a Parksville project originally and began the league. So Dave Wallace and Clyde Anoe, two Parksville folks, started the Island Premier Baseball League in 1995. And that was a success, 4 teams in that league originally. And the next year it expanded to include the Lower Mainland, and the name of the league was changed to the BC Premier Baseball League. We've had, over our history, about 112 of our players move on to college and professional baseball. So that's our role, is to take the baton from Rob's team at OMBA for those players who are interested in playing baseball at a higher level at college or the pros. And together, Rob and I work to make everything flow, if you will, at Springwood Park. So again, for those who aren't aware, this is the field structure at Springwood Park. OMBA has the fields for Mosquito and Pee-wee on the far left, Springwood Pee-wee Old, and on the far right. OMBA and the Royals share Anoe Wallace Field in the center there. And then on the Rotary Diamond, both the younger kids and the older kids use different corners of that field. Just for some recent history, this past July, the Royals hosted the provincials for the senior BC PBL. We won silver, which, hey, wanted gold, but it was a heck of an event. 7 teams from around the province in town for that tournament, using our hotels, using our facilities. 7 graduates from that team moved on to play college baseball in Canada and the United States. Same time, Oceanside Minor Baseball hosted the Pee-wee Single A Provincials. They also won silver. It was a popular color this year. 10 teams from around the province in Parksville for that event. So we just want to very briefly talk about some past projects so you understand the history. Oceanside Minor Baseball and the Royals have always looked to cooperate and partner with the city on projects. So when we bring a proposal to the table, we always come with our share of fundraising or contributions to that event. We're never coming here looking for straight dollars out. We know that tax dollars are precious, and as much as it benefits the kids in the community, we have to sort of step up and be partners in this endeavor. So just a couple of projects up here. The scoreboard on Springwood Old, materials and labor, about $12,000 was entirely funded by OMBA. The grassy knoll excavation, landscape, and seeding of the bramble patch beyond the outfield, a $25,000 project entirely funded by donations and completed with volunteer management, working really closely with city management. We shared our plan with them. They had made sure that we were on top of that the whole way. Equipment shed, the batting cage was completed in 2009. Budget was $104,000. We received a $40,000 capital grant, and $64K came from Oceanside and the Royals. That, of course, now is a city asset. We had a portable batting cage turtle that we split the cost with the city. There were some complaints that our old portable batting cage was ineffective and allowing too many balls to travel into the adjoining tennis courts. So we upgraded that. City contributed, Oceanside Minor Baseball contributed, the Royals contributed. New scoreboard in it was originally put up in 1998. In the 2018 season, it started to fail. OMBA and the Royals worked with the city to put a new scoreboard up April 2021. Cost was $52,000. City of Parksville graciously covered $20,000, and the remainder was split 50-50 by Oceanside Minor Baseball and the Royals. As part of that project, the city of Parksville also moved forward with a long-time plan to permanently make Noe Wallace a baseball field. Prior to that, for 21 odd years and about 10 years that I was involved, we would put the fence up every April and take the fence down every September. Don't miss that at all. One of the reasons that this got the go-ahead was that the field would be damaged quite severely from other user groups, the outfield, and the city would spend a lot of money rehabilitating the outfield every spring to make it safe for the kids to play. And so by making it baseball only, we saved, there was a capital cost, of course, but we saved maintenance and operating dollars because it required less activity on that field. All right, and I'll turn this back to Rob, who will talk about the cinder.
Thank you. What we'd like to discuss is the red cinder on the two fields. The two fields at Springwood Park, the Royals and Oceanside Baseball share the main field, and OMBA uses the smaller field for our age groups 9 to 13. Both fields are red cinder and have been for as long as I can remember. Over the years, the city and baseball have always split the costs. The original field was actually all placed by volunteers and constructed by volunteers, and the smaller field had the red cinder done by the city around 2011, I believe. And it was city staff that chose their red cinder for the smaller field, which we were very grateful for. In 2018, a delegation came from baseball to council for a few items. One was to help with the cost of the cinder. Council approved paying a portion, which was greatly appreciated. Then we sourced and ordered the cinder with city staff, very closely with city staff. Since the spring of 2018, the city of Parksville and baseball have split the cost of the red cinder 50-50. Last week, I emailed city staff asking when we were going to place our annual order. To my surprise, I then received an email back stating they were no longer going to pay for half. We were completely blindsided. So instead of ordering the material like in years past, we were told that was no longer an option. We had budgeted and planned for the usual order. We're a nonprofit and we have no money. We are now left panicking and scrambling. I don't know, as a small association, that we'll be able to cover the cost of the red cinder. If we are somehow able to do it, it would only by increasing our registration fees for players. Young families in this town are already struggling. Inflation's high, interest rates are high. Everything is more expensive, from gas to groceries. Every year we have more families applying for assistance just to have their child play youth sports. sorry. Our costs of association have risen drastically. Just last month, we were forced to raise our registration fees by 35%. Every year, we usually raise them by $5. This has been the single largest increase since I've been involved in baseball. In the last 30 years, there's been no new baseball fields built in Oceanside. But in the last 30 years, Oceanside has changed dramatically. Especially in the last 10 years, we've seen substantial growth, which means more players, more demand, but the less facilities are the same facilities as old. It's extremely challenging. However, with substantial growth comes a larger tax base, development cost charges, and money collected from developers for parks. It would be reasonable to assume that the Springwood budget could be increased by $5,000 a year to cover the cost of the placement and purchase of the red cinder. Yes, gray gravel is cheaper, but it's just that, it's cheaper. And to switch the baseball fields over to gray gravel would be a massive downgrade and cost well over $20,000 to dig out all this red cinder we spent decades putting in place, raking and grooming, and replace it with a lesser product. We propose increasing the Springwood Park budget by $5,000 a year to maintain the red cinder. It is cheaper to maintain and is far better playing surface than is already there. I've checked with other municipalities on the island and had conversations with my peers and several other baseball associations. When I spoke to Nanaimo, they stated they are currently doing the bare minimum to maintain what they have because they plan to go to a full artificial turf field by 2016. The budget for that project is $3.1 million. Comox Valley is investing over $80,000 into their field. Campbell River has recently moved the entire association from Nuns Creek to another facility that includes a baseball-specific indoor training facility. Port Alberni and Cochrane have invested money into their fields as well, but nothing to the scale of the Nanaimo, Comox, and Campbell River. So by comparison, other municipalities would appear are receiving, so by comparison with other municipalities, it would appear we are not receiving similar funding or support as our peers. However, all we are asking is that the red cinder remain and be maintained. Every association I spoke to also mentioned they're trying to find a way to go to artificial turf. Droughts are more common. Water is a very serious issue for everyone. Artificial turf has come down in cost, but it's still expensive. A turf infield starts at $500,000. There are only two high-performance athletic clubs in Oceanside. One is the Oceanside Generals Hockey Club, and the other is the Royals Baseball Club. Both programs are a huge source of pride for our community. However, to give you some context, the hockey club is in the process of getting a $350,000 change room. What makes baseball different? I understand you have a lot of delegations coming here, generally asking just for money and help. The difference is we build buildings, we clear brush, we paint, we rake, we shovel, and we improve the baseball every year. OMBA has invested over $215,000 in parks and improvements and counting. In fact, we have a standing tradition every year at the park to leave it better than we found it. This year, we repainted dugouts at Springwood Old and upgraded the score booth with proper chairs, desks, shelving, announcing equipment, and speakers. Total cost well over $6,000. All this was paid for by our OMBA and our sponsors, and all work performed by volunteers. All of this work was absolutely no cost to city, taxpayers, or burden to staff. OMBA was able also to host 2 tournaments at Springwood Park last year, bringing in teams from all over the province for a 13U tournament and 11U regional tournament. Each tournament runs 4 to 5 days and brings in a total of 24 teams, which brings in tens of thousands of dollars to our local economy. These types of events are held every year at no cost to the city, taxpayers, and no burden to city staff. This is positive cash flow brought to our city solely from baseball. We're not asking for 3.1 million. We're not asking for 350K. We're not even asking for 80,000. We're not asking for a handout. We're not asking that you give us money. All we're asking is you help us maintain what we already have. By increasing the Springwood Park budget by $5,000 a year and instructing staff to purchase the same cinder annually and spread the cinder and perform annual maintenance in the spring. We're only asking for exactly what we need, not a dime or a dollar more. Is that my wrap up? Okay, in 44 years, the Oceanside Minor Baseball has been a part of Parksville. We've only come to council twice. We're a very well-run organization. We manage our resources very well, applying for grants, signing up local sponsors, traditional fundraisers. I understand the council has a lot of delegations that are asking for money, but as you can see, baseball asks for very little and gives very much in return. I wouldn't stand before you and ask if I wasn't willing to do it myself. I put my money where my mouth is, and my companies and myself have donated over $35,000 to improvements at Springwood Park, as well as thousands of volunteer hours, and will continue to do so. In closing, I believe the request is reasonable and fair. Mayor and council have an opportunity to show support for families, youth players, and a nonprofit that contributes. If you have any questions whatsoever, please just contact me and ask. If you'd love to come to the park and take a quick tour, give you a little bit of a history and a background, we'd love to do that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you, our delegation. Any questions from council for the delegation today? Councilor Beal.
Thank you very much. And through the mayor's chair to our delegation, first of all, I want to thank you for coming in today. I have lived in the community quite a long while and have always appreciated the work that's been done up for the Ball Diamonds and have enjoyed watching games there on that traditional May long weekend. And as a former educator, I've had a few students who've ended up going through the program and going on to those baseball scholarships. So, I really do value what you, and I'm very aware of the amount of work that you have contributed and how you worked alongside the city. A question I have, well, I guess there's two parts. One is I'm still curious to know about the batting cage, or no, sorry, was it for the batting cage? Yes, if the batting cage, does that mean that request is kind of on hold? And the other, if I could ask that question first of all, is so are you setting aside whatever it is because I wasn't clear from what I read if you were wanting permission to, let's say, work with the city to do this yourself, or if you needed some funds to complete the batting cage enclosure. I wonder if you could.
So to answer your question, the batting cages and lights on the field we have 2-year projects, 5-year projects, 10-year projects. So the batting cage and being enclosed, we pay thousands of dollars to Arbutus Meadows, and again, can't afford it. So we were trying to get grants and get the ball rolling on enclosing the batting cage. Then after last week's events, essentially, the red cinder takes precedence. We need a playing surface first, right? So we kind of put that on the shelf for now. Our main concern is definitely the red cinder, and also, unfortunately, we ran out of time, is also the concession. The city did an inspection on the concession, and it's been there for 20 years and there were no issues, but apparently there's issues. And so the Royals need that concession because that's probably their number one way that they offset their costs. So unfortunately, we ran out of time. But to answer your question, yes, maybe one day we'll be back for the cage. I hope so. But right now, the red cinder and the concession are paramount.
Season starts to 68 days.
Go ahead, Councilor Beal.
Thank you very much. One clarification for me regarding the red cinder, and I do appreciate the request. I think, having lived in this area for a long time, I knew Clyde Inouye personally as well, and appreciate that those fields are Fenway Park, right? So the red cinder request is primarily for 2 of the fields that are there. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so I understand that other fields in the community would not necessarily require that, but 2 of those fields are what you're asking for.
And that's a really good question. To add to your point, the Springwood Quad, for example, is a multi-use field, right? Whereas baseball is baseball specific because we have mounts, right? So softball, soccer, baseball, a plethora of sports use the Springwood Quad. We'll only use the community center. So they'll use gravel, flat, because if you're playing soccer and you run into gravel, that's totally doable. But where on a baseball field, not so much of an option, right? So that's why the baseball fields in itself are unique. And then that's why the other ones are kind of gravel, because they're more of a multi-use all weather.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you for your delegation here and what you do. From my perspective as volunteers, you're doing a great job, and that's what it takes, and you're doing what needs to be done. It seems like a minimal request. Thank you very much. Appreciate the overview. I've been up to those parks. They're beautiful. It's well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mayor O'Brien.
And thank you through the chair and through the delegation. Thanks for your presentation today. I apologize for my lateness. My legs aren't working this weekend the way that's what they should be. I'm getting there, but I received your request last week anyways regarding the cinder track. And I understand your concern for it. Unfortunately, before this budget meeting anyways, we haven't had a chance to meet with our staff due to very complex appointment schedules that we have. And so what we're doing is we're going to look into it. Your request seems reasonable. I want to find out, what the full details are, why, we're considering going to the other, what the ramifications are for and against. I do appreciate you letting us know that your preference is the red cinder to be maintained, at least anyways, and probably improved. But at this time, we haven't had the opportunity to get together with Graham, which is what it's all about. And so I appreciate it. I got from the tone of your letter that you were rather serious about this, and we'll look at that in the same light. But at the same time, we have to confer with staff. We're just council members, although big Royals fans. It doesn't mean that we have to understand from our staff what their perspective is, and that's what we're looking at here. And also, as far as we do appreciate all the work that you do at the Springwood Park, and recognize that you're comparing us to the city of Nanaimo, Courtney, Comox, and so forth. The population bases are rather large as compared to going to an all-season turf field and so forth. Maybe a little out of our reach right at this particular time, recognizing that this is Springwood and this is Oceanside, and we are the only ones that have the ball diamonds, which I'm kind of proud of because I'm a ball fan. So I'm very pleased with that. But at the same time, we do know that our staff do a lot of maintenance on Springwood. We recognize the budget for Springwood Park alone is close to what our budget is for our main community park as well, to do the maintenance on it. And we appreciate all the fact that the teams and so forth get in there and pitch in and help. And that's what makes a community park a community park. And that's your participation in it. And your teams have done us proud in the past, and will continue to do so. And we appreciate the management that you have actually running that as well. So just to let you know, we won't be able to give you an answer today on your request anyways. And I understand the batting cage is being put on hold because you've recognized that there's a priority here that we should address first. And I appreciate you let's solve this problem first, and then we'll move on to the next one after that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for appearing, gentlemen. Going back to chairing it, that's my only comments at this point. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I think we have one more question from Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for your presentation, and just echo what the other councillors have said. Thank you for all the work and your volunteer time that you put in at Oceanside Baseball. And I will kind of tag along what the mayor just mentioned, that this is a regional recreation facility, in my opinion. Have you had a chance to speak with the RDN or the town of Qualicum Beach for some support, whether it's financial or other?
So the RDN just manages the town of Qualicum. We run our younger age groups at, so we use town of Qualicum quite a bit. Except there's a huge soccer conflict there, so there's a lack of fields for all users. We all know that. There's so I would say our tadpole and our younger groups, like say 11 down, all those teams practice in Qualicum. So Qualicum does do their share, if you will, like they do chip in. They definitely, I can't see them. We are pursuing projects at the Qualicum field on their fields to make them a little bit more baseball friendly. So to answer your question, I believe we're kind of, as Oceanside, like understand, is Parksville bearing the brunt, right? Fair question. In this case, with baseball, no.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. Through yourself to the delegation, Mike and Rob. We're talking about numbers today. This is a financial meeting. Reading Graham's email, it seems like the red cinder might cost the city $9,626.53. Is that the city's cost for the new cinder, or we'd be splitting that with you guys? And what does that increase over, say, last year when we had to buy, or whenever we bought red cinder last year?
So it was the same as last year. So that's a 2-year order.
2-year.
So we used to, I'm a contractor and a builder, and so I'm very well aware of the costs. So what we do for layman's terms is the shipping is what you look at that, shipping is what kills us.
Mhm.
So we take a semi-truck C-can, if you will.
Mhm.
And we do it, they wanted to do it annually and it made no sense for shipping. So we do it every 2 years and we jam that thing right up to the last pound, right? They rail it over, we get it over. So the $9,600 is a 2-year,
Mhm.
is a 2-year supply. That's where kind of where the $5,000 came from or started, right? So that's kind of where the number started. And then so regardless of, like, I understand your city managers, they have budgets, right? And they don't like to see them get added to their costs, right? So that's why when I looked at this, I thought the easiest thing to do would be to increase their budget by the $5,000, and that would alleviate the cost of the cinder. If we can source the cinder, find something that's equally or better, that's cheaper, and source it out, I'm all for it.
Mhm.
Like, finding that took us a year to source that material. And then to go in now and mix in a different material, or heaven forbid, gray dirt, would actually be a disaster, right? So would ruin the playing surface. So it's like we've invested, for argument's sakes, tens of thousands of dollars in this, and then now we want to rip it all out. I can't wrap my head around it financially.
It's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just to be clear, Councillor Wood, when we came to council in 2018 to initiate this proposal, the spirit of the agreement was that the city was picking up 50% and the Royals and OMBA would pick up the other.
Mhm.
So each year since then, the city has ordered the cinder for $9,000, $10,000 in that range. The city has paid half of that,
Mhm.
and we've cut a check to the city for the other half. And we, as Rob mentioned earlier, contacted the city a couple weeks ago saying, hey, let's get going. About time, season's about to start. And they came back and said, if you look here, if you look at the letter of the agreement, it doesn't matter what we've done for the last 6 years. The letter of the agreement is we should only pay the gray cost.
Mhm.
And we thought, well, that's a great way to undercut us.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much. I think that's all questions from council. Thank you very much for your delegation. I'd like to echo the comments made about the importance you play, role you play in our community. And our strategic plan also does call for more recreational facilities, so or opportunities. So what you're bringing today is in line with what we're trying to do here as a council as well during our term. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
We have one more delegation today, the Oceanside Community Arts Council. So maybe we'll turn it over to the mayor here now, and he can invite the delegation to the.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Councillor Grants, for taking over during for the first delegation. Appreciate it. For our next delegation, we have the Oceanside Community Arts Council for the BC Culture Days 2024. We have a presentation by Jennifer Bate and P. Withapea.
With a P.
Thank you. On behalf of the Oceanside Community Arts Council regarding BC Culture Days 2024, including a schedule of events, budget sponsorships, and partnerships. You have 10 minutes, ladies. Thank you very much for attending. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. So switching out of recreation into arts and culture, I'm actually here representing the BC Culture Days Planning Committee. My name is Jennifer Bate. I am the Executive Director of the McMillan Arts Centre. We do have members of our Oceanside Community Arts Council in the audience today. We have Stuart Clark, the President of the OCAC, as well as John Waring, who is our Treasurer of the OCAC. And I'd also like to say hi to Jeff from the Vancouver Island Regional Library, who's here as a supporter. He will be involved with some of the programming that we have coming up. This is going to be an amazing year for arts and culture in the city of Parksville. We have hosted BC Culture Days events since 2021. And this year marks the 15th anniversary of the Culture Days programming across the country. We are very, very proud to announce that because of the success of the programs that we've run for the last 3 years, Parksville has been chosen as the host city for the opening ceremonies for the province this year. Culture Days will run from September 20th to October 13th, and we have a lot of wonderful events to talk about. The events that we're planning this year is the event schedule itself is not complete. We are in the middle of choosing and working with different groups in the community for other things that we can do, but I wanted to actually touch on a couple of 5, in particular 5 events. Our opening ceremony is going to be on Saturday, September the 21st. Along with the opening ceremony, we are also going to be running a community murals project at the Jensen Center in Parksville. To honor Truth and Reconciliation Day and this family-focused event, engaging the community in our Welcome to BC Culture Days, and we will be participating in a mural project under the guidance of well-respected mural artist Adam Lewis of the Waikai Nation. In addition to that, going on that same day, we have a children's literary project in partnership with the Vancouver Island Library. Local artist Gina Adams creates characters in the style of Beatrix Potter. Gina has created artwork and will be engaging the public that day in the creation of a children's book. Participants will be selecting artwork and helping Gina create a story over the course of 3 sessions, starting that day, the opening day, September 21st. In addition, that day, we have a Walk on Water project at the Jensen Center also. Just to get a little bit clear about this scientific sort of fun culture event, non-Newtonian fluid is the scientific term for a substance that can behave as a solid or a liquid. Participants will use tempera paint to create colorful shapes in the liquid pool and then dip hands or toes into the non-toxic liquid. Like magic, they will discover that when pressure is applied, the pool becomes solid. Another fun event for the opening day. In addition to this opening ceremony community murals project, we will be presenting again the Exquisite Corpse project and gala. This has become one of the most popular events that we have for Culture Days. This is a popular collaborative art event featuring 45 local artists who all create 15 paintings in sequence without seeing anybody else's work until the final collection is unveiled at a public gala event. We have booked the Jensen Center for this particular event, which happens on Saturday, October the 5th. In the past, we partnered with Bayside, who put on a wonderful event for us, and we've outgrown the Bayside now, so we're looking for a larger event space. The Steampunk Miniature Metal Sculpture Recycling Project. The date and location is still to be determined. The objective of this family-focused hands-on project is to engage people creating artwork using recycled materials. Participants will gather all of their scrap metal in a scavenger hunt and then create wonderful sculptures from those materials. Lastly, we have our Art Banner Crawl, another downtown event engaging all of our members of the community to come downtown. This is a treasure hunt, and it continues with the addition of 3 new artist banners this year. Visitors and residents alike will have fun walking downtown Parksville to locate art banners on their treasure map. Completed maps will be returned to the Macmillan Arts Center, while participants will receive a prize. These are some of the events that we have done in the past. Next slide will show that we actually have ancillary events that will occur in Oceanside during the same time frame. These events are independently funded and are included in our hub list promoted by BC Culture Days. The list will continue to grow as planning progresses. Circus Freaks is an organization presenting aerial acrobatic performances in Parksville. They will be putting on a fun event during the Culture Days programming. The Nanoose Bay Quilters has an exhibition at Nanoose Bay. The Mid-Vancouver Island Habitat Enhancement Society with BC Rivers will be doing a project during that same time frame. We also are pleased to announce that the Route 19A Music Festival is happening during the same dates of the BC Culture Days, representing different music events in 9 small hall venues throughout Oceanside. And lastly, the DeCosmos Fine Arts Society has an exhibition at the Macmillan Arts Centre, all during the same timeframe of BC Culture Days. This is going to be an amazing opportunity for people to truly celebrate arts and culture in Parksville. We have to date applied for support for these BC Culture Days. The Oceanside Community Arts Council has pledged $7,450 towards the programming. BC Culture Days themselves will also be giving us $5,000. And we have a Vancouver Island and a private donor who's going to be donating $1,200 specifically for the Children's Literary Project. We will continue to find funding opportunities and plan for funding to be taken into account with the budget. Right now, we're applying for an RDN grant, but we do plan to talk to BC Tourism, the Parksville Downtown Business Association, PQ Foundation, the Chamber of Commerce. And if we can create a wonderful arts and culture event featuring First Nations or a celebration in some way, it is Truth and Reconciliation Day coming up in the same time, we might be able to apply for a grant through First Nations funding. Lastly, on this last slide, here's our budget for the BC Culture Days. The opening ceremony and the community murals project is $6,000. You can work your way through the project here. The total budget is $23,500. To date, we have secured funding for $13,650, and our shortfall now is $9,850. We would respectfully request that the City of Parksville consider becoming a main sponsor of BC Culture Days 2024, and in particular, the opening ceremony and community murals project and the art banner crawl project, as it is a community engagement focused project in the downtown business core, and up to a total of $9,850. I just wanted to say, in addition to thanking you for the opportunity to come before you, there are some really, really interesting statistics when it comes to Culture Days. They actually sent it after the Culture Days nationally finished this year. 86% of people report an increased pride and care for the community where they live by attending these sorts of events, arts and culture events. 65% of the participants reported an increased desire to contribute towards truth and reconciliation, and 62% of people reported that they would likely spend more money on arts and culture locally after spending some time with the Community Arts and Cultures Project. Once again, thank you on behalf of the BC Culture Days Planning Committee, and we would be happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Jennifer. It sounds like you have a very ambitious program of events this year. It's pretty exciting. A little bit of old, a little bit of new, a lot of new, which is pretty exciting. Your proven programs in the past are coming back. So that's good to hear. Open the floor to the council anyways. Any questions for the delegation, please? Councillor Martin.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Have we had donations in the past that we've given for this sponsorship before?
Yes, we were very, very fortunate to have a substantial sponsorship given to us in our second year for BC Culture Days. Because of that donation, I can't remember how much it was. This $26,900 in the second year. We were able to initiate most of what the programming that we do now.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Beal.
Hello, thank you. And through the mayor to our delegation, thank you. Thank you for the whirlwind presentation there. I am wondering, so as I understand it, the ask is for up to, let's say, $10,000, a little bit less, but that you will continue to seek funding opportunities and apply for grants in the interim. Is that correct?
That's correct. We have a plan of funding of applications that are going to continue over the next several months. The Culture Days that happen in September. Right now, our shortfall recognizes the planning that we have now. I'd recommend that the city consider sponsoring some or, those two events that we talked about, the opening ceremonies, the community murals project, and the art banner project as a sponsor. We are the host city. BC Culture Days will be coming here to celebrate the opening ceremonies with the city. If we get more funding, we will be able to produce more events also. So the shortfall that we have here today represents the budget as it is now, the plans that are in effect now for the scheduling. Yes, up to 9850. Thank you.
Follow up. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. You mentioned the mural project and that there's community engagement. Is the intent to have this, would this be an outside mural on the side of a building? And would that be in the downtown area? Is there
Did you
plan
answer
for that?
Patty Ann?
Yes, thank you for your question, Councillor Beal. The answer is absolutely yes. It is only for downtown Parksville. And we do have a couple of buildings in mind. One being the very building we're in right now.
Go ahead.
And may I ask with the, so that's very interesting. I mean, if we were to be the sponsor, for instance, for the mural project, it's something that lasts and will be seen and enjoyed, you know, for many, many years to come. So that's encouraging. With the art banners, I guess two things. One is, would a letter of support from the city also be beneficial in order for, like, are there other ways that the city can also support your efforts for additional fundraising? And also, what happens to the art, with the art banners? Is there also a need then to request some support in kind in order for them to go up? And has this been done in the past? So two parts there.
Thanks, Councillor Beal. Yes, we currently have 8 banners in the city, in and around the Parksville downtown area. We wish to add 3 more this year. These banners are permanent. The art banner treasure hunt can continue year round, not just in the months of, or in the weeks of Culture Days. We actually still have people coming to the MAC looking for a treasure map that they've heard about at the information center. The city has been very, very supportive of this project by helping us get the banners mounted up into the standards throughout the downtown core.
Thank you. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. Through yourself to Jennifer. I heard a list that you were going to ask for funding from various sources. Was the Parksville Downtown Business Association was on there, but was the Parksville Qualicum Beach Tourism Association on that list?
Yes, it is,
Okay.
through the chamber. Yes,
Sure.
yes.
Okay.
We
Thank you.
haven't done any of these funding yet. We've only just started getting going on that.
Sure.
The PDBA in particular, I'm hoping that they will be able to sponsor some of the projects that we're doing. And as I say sponsor, I think that one of the businesses that is really looking forward to having a mural on his building is right downtown. So I think there might be an interest in members of the PDBA, and I plan to approach the PDBA in that respect by asking businesses if they're interested in becoming involved, that perhaps that they could approve a sponsorship.
Sure. Thank you very much for all the work that you're doing on Culture Days.
Excuse me, Councillor Wood, I'd just like to add to that. The PDBA did sponsor one of our events last year.
Sure.
And we've been working really well with them on projects of theirs, and then having them also come back up and support us. And I'm sorry they couldn't be here today. Also, sorry, one more thing. I'd like to thank Councillor Martin. The last time I was here, it was the day after BC Culture Days 2023 had closed. So I put together a list. Obviously, we've made quite a few changes and improvements. It's a fluid document until we secure all of the funding. But in particular, I'm pointing out Councillor Martin because one of the things that she asked me for when I was here last time was to reach out and look for opportunities for funding outside of the City of Parksville Council. And it's been a really rewarding experience. So thank you for that. We've uncovered opportunities that we didn't know were available. Unfortunately, we missed some of the deadlines, but we're well positioned for 2025 to take advantage of any type of grant funding that's available to us and at least apply for it.
Thank you. Councillor Gore, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Hello, good morning, ladies. Thank you for the presentation. And again, I do want to mention that art and culture, in my opinion, are a soul of a community. And how much it brings the sense of belonging and the sense of community. So they're very important. Since we've hosted the BC Culture Days previously, how well are those attended? How many people do you see come outside of Oceanside? Or how many locals attend those events, if you can?
Thank you, Councillor Watt. The numbers are very difficult to wrap our hands around simply because as mandated by Canada Culture Days across the country, all the events have to be free or pay what you may by donation. So we can't register people. We can't really keep track of them. But I will tell you this, from year number one, where we really didn't know what to expect, to year number two, where we blew it out of the park with the kind support of the city of Parksville, we had 400 people show up for an event that we hoped that 150 would show up. So it's kind of a fluid situation, and that's the way it is when you're doing community outreach. That's truly part of a nonprofit situation. I will tell you though that the numbers up here are all as a result in the graphic, all as a result of the forms that we fill out and surveys that we fill out, organizers for Canada Culture Days, and they're combined nationally. So what you're looking at is national results. Year number 3, which was last year, again, we had way more attendees than we thought at some of the events. However, we got rained out on one and had to switch it over to what's now Jensen Center at the last minute. So it's really difficult to say, but I will tell you this, the main thing that we can expect from BC Culture Days in terms of support is the incredible amount of publicity and promotion that they do at no cost for us. And they do it province-wide. They invite everybody to come to the kickoff city because that's the celebration for British Columbia. So we're hoping that using CAPTCHA data this year, we can capture the information of how impactful it is for Parksville as a tourist city.
You're good. Thank you for that clarification. You brought up a couple of points I just wanted to clarify for my own mind. The Culture Days this year is in September. The exact date,
September 20th until October 13th.
Thank you.
So September 21st is the actual kickoff date. We will have delegations from BC Culture Days also attending.
Right. Thank you. And Councilor Gore brought up a very good point, and you mentioned anyways, something I had always wondered, the cost is free or by donation to everyone. And then that makes it a total community event. And so that's very impressive, but to introduce so many to the arts and culture of our area anyways. And so I appreciate that. So thank you.
It's a mandate, but the reason behind it is it's barrier free. So anyone and everyone can come and attend as opposed to just those who can afford it.
Right. Thank you. And then I understand you also have a partnership with the Parksville Beats Festival Society, being responsible for their ticket sales for the Outdoor Performing Arts Theater, which you do an amazing job with anyways. And so does that play a part of contributing to your budget, your fee for service anyways, that you obviously pass it through on your ticket sales for the gate anyways, is that part of this, or does that, your funding from that, from your efforts, does that go into your regular budget?
The funding or the income revenues that we get from the box office ticketing
Yes.
goes into the Arts Council budget, general
Okay.
budget. The Arts Council has pledged to sponsor BC Culture Days for $7,450 this year. So
That answers two questions. Thank you. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, you're supporting yourself. Yeah, good for you. Councillor Beal.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And a question more to perhaps yourself or to staff. If this is something that obviously this is a request for some financial support, a sponsorship, and we're discussing budget here. So I don't know if we need to make a motion at this time, or if we can add it to a wish list that we have. But I'm also wondering if we are able to sponsor those two events, and where could that funding come from? So I'm just wondering, would it have to be property taxes, or is this something that would fit in with growing communities or some other such fund? I certainly see a nice fit with our downtown revitalization. Things will be staying there, as well as community engagement. And I see a lot of positives here. And certainly having Parksville as the city for the whole province is really quite an honor. So I wonder where that money could come from.
Thank you for that, Councillor Beal. I was wondering the same thing when I'm seeing that budget slide that we have right up here, and I'm going through my paperwork and thinking, well, I hope I have a copy of that, but I don't see one. So I'm going to first ask the CEO Kaler, do we have a copy of this budget slide already that the delegation has brought through? I didn't see anything in my background information here. I was going to say, as for Councillor Beal's, because it actually relates to the fact of, where funding could come from which direction, from our grants and so forth, and to address it later on in our budget deliberations this morning, I hope.
Yeah.
So do we have this information before you leave? Do we have this information before you go?
Thank you. So through you to council, we were initially asked to support 29,000. So councillors have a handout on their table with all of the items that we are looking for direction from you today. There's 24 items on the list, and now the Oceanside Minor Baseball will be number 25. So you'll see number 3 on that list is the BC Culture Days 2024 item. And so later on, the Chief Financial Officer is going to be talking about all of these items kind of one by one and getting direction from council on what you want to fund. And then there are some recommendations of what we think is eligible for things like gas tax or grants. And then some that we think are more property tax related. So those items will be discussed with you as well as we go through each of those wish lists, if you want to call them that. And that's later on this morning. So the council could not make decisions on some things today, but we are really hoping to get that direction so Jetta can adjust the budget and kind of look at everything as a whole rather than as a one-off. So you'll notice that some of these items were discussed at earlier committees of the whole, and we've kind of accumulated them all together so that you can look at the big picture and not one at a time. So you'll notice like the total tax that would need to be requisitioned is there, but we pretty much realize council won't be approving all of those 24 items. So Jetta has provided a lot of information on that handout for you. We did not receive this slide, so we can certainly maybe just we have the copy of the presentation, so we can just keep that ready for council and bring it up on the projector when we're discussing that item later on this morning.
Right, and thank you for that, CEO Kaler. My concern is that the delegation has presented as to the different sponsorships and the different rates, which has a good ring to it for myself anyways, for the city of Parksville, whether it's the opening ceremonies or whatever. But as you say, we have this slide on our presentation. So when we get to talking to this later on council, then we'll have the breakdown if we can consider and have a discussion on that. At that time, does that meet with your, what we're trying to get at here, Councillor Beal? Because we're going to have that, and I say that's a very important document. The ask on our work plan here is on number 3 is for the full 29,000, but that's going to break down what the different items are if the city was to participate in a sponsorship. So that's good. Councillor Beal, go ahead.
I'd just like to say it's really nice to see a group come here, you know, first with the 29,000 and now the request has dropped by over 20,000.
love that.
It's very, we
Yes,
need
yes.
more of you.
I'm
No.
Very impressive. Councillor Martin.
Yes, thank you very much. What it is too is accepting the fact that we have to be very careful with our dollars, you know, from your perspective and ours. So thank you for that.
If I could just add,
Okay.
it would help with our grants and funding if we had a letter of support from the city of Parksville. So if that's something that we could consider at this time, I recognize that we won't get an answer right away for the budget, but a letter of support will help us as we continue trying to gather more funding through other sources.
It's being noted as you spoke.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions for the delegation at this time, council? No, that's, thank you very much for a well done presentation. Nice to see you again. And we'll do all we can to do everything we can within our powers.
Thank you
to
very
support
much.
you.
We'll
Thank
see you on the 21st.
Thank you. Council, moving forward, we have correspondence from the Parksville Beach Festival Society regarding financial support for the 2024 Parksville Beach Festival Society. We have no delegation. It's the correspondence as per attached. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that the correspondence from the Parksville Beach Festival Society dated December 12th, 2023, requesting financial support in the amount of $7,500 for the 2024 Parksville Beach Festival events be received? Got a mover and a seconder for moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Martin. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That it carries. Thank you. Moving on, the first report on the agenda is regarding our Committee of the Whole December 11th, 2023 meeting recommendations, council endorsement of recommendations from the December 11th, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting. I'm going to call it out for those that are listening in. Those recommendations are that the following existing corporate work plan items on slide number 9 of the December 11th corporate work plan presentation be deferred to 2025. 4, number 2, long-term solution to provide increased accessibility to the ocean. Next is number 12, the mail-in ballot system. Next would be 28, the lacrosse box detailed design and upgrade. Next is number 38, Pioneer Road Playground engagement, design and final budget. And at point 2, that the following new corporate work plan items be deferred to the 2025 budget process, the PDBA partnership on year-round lighting and the snow clearing regarding new capital equipment and increased level of service. I have a mover and seconder for the recommendations. Moved by Councillor Gore, seconded by Councillor Beal. Any discussion? All those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. Councillor Beal, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to comment that I do think that our commercial neighbors did an exceptionally good job, certainly far better than I have seen in previous years in clearing the sidewalks in front of their buildings. I can't speak to the whole city, but certainly from the Orange Bridge right to Corfield Street, it was the best I've ever seen.
And I will put in the comment, I received quite a few emails to say that our snow fight or our snow clearing from the roads and so forth, handled by the city of Parksville staff, was exceptional. And if there's a competition as compared to the rest of the areas on Vancouver Island, Parksville really did over and above the call of duty and made our streets safe, which was, I think, indicative of by the amount of mishaps that did not happen. And I believe because our crews got out there so fast and efficiently. So a big thank you to our staff for getting on top of it over and above. Thank you. Do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation that the following items referred on slide number 10 of the December 11th corporate plan presentation be deleted from the 2024 corporate work plan and corresponding budget where applicable? For number 6, designate Despard as an ecological site. Number 7 and 41 for the Phil St. Luke statue and committee. Number 45 for the OCP review. Number 47, develop criterion policy to expedite affordable housing. Proposed new item of tree bylaw review, and the proposed new item of hydrant metering for construction. Mover and seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Beal. Any discussion? Thank you. All those in favor? Carried. Sorry, all those in favor? And those opposed? Councillor Gore is opposed. Thank you. That carries. The next report is for the Chief Administrative Officer, the corporate work plan update, a verbal update on the corporate work plan. Do I have a mover in it? Okay, let's have the plan first and then we'll move. If I may, perhaps at this time, ask for a 5-minute comfort break at this time for everybody to loosen up. And that's exactly what I want to do. Oh, thank you. Good morning, we're back. Council, thank you so much. And at the podium here is our CAO Kaler, our Chief Administration Officer, regarding the corporate work plan update. Ms. Kaler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this will be, for those that were watching prior, this will be an update for the corporate work plan and still currently draft until some of the decisions are made later today and throughout the budget process. So I'm going to go fairly quickly through some of the slides. So if councillors have questions, they can flag the chair down throughout, and I'll slow down. Uh-oh, if I can't advance the slides now. I'm slowing down without even starting. There we go. So council should be fairly familiar with this process now. So we bring a corporate work plan to council usually twice a year. So the idea is that you would have this at the beginning of the year when you're doing your budget, and then best practices would suggest there would be few changes throughout the year. A lot of local governments are actually moving to multi-year as well now so that they can plan better and are being more disciplined about, changing in a multi-year phase. And that just provides certainty to staff and for the budget. So one thing I would like to flag on this slide is the bullet sort of towards the end there, that every decision you make as a council has a cost. And I think that councillors understand that, but I think some of the residents maybe don't. And so whether it's direct or indirect costs, some costs are already what we say are sort of operational or within the departmental budgets, and others have direct costs, such as hiring a consultant or giving a grant. And some projects have both of those costs. So I think it's very important to remember that and make sure that the citizens and residents and stakeholders remember that as well. And then this year, what we're noticing is that there's been very high profile discussions around the housing changes that the provincial government has made, but there are many, many things that the province has been doing that are impacting our capacity, and they're not council direction. So examples would be changes to financial reporting. At first, we are getting grants from the province for things like climate change, and they're saying we don't have reporting, and then halfway through, they're switching that to say now we do have quite extensive reporting. We have changes on the emergency management side. We have changes to asset management requirements. There's just very many all the way across our provincial mandates, so things on social planning. And what we're finding is that a significant amount of our time, it's almost like we work for the province. And so this year, we're going to track that more diligently. We've been feeling it anecdotally, but we've actually added a column to our timesheets, and management are going to track how many times we have to go on a webinar or we have to respond to a provincial directive to give them information or participate in some project that they find is a priority, but is really not in your strategic plan. So that'll be something we'll bring to you at the end of this year. Okay. So just a quick reminder for everybody on what council's current strategic focus areas are. I would say at this point, with the budget that has been approved and the work plan, there's a very strong focus and support on drinking water and recreation. So folks who want to see those things reflected can look through the work plan and the budget, and they will see that council has allocated money, allocated funding and staff to provide high service levels in those two areas. Not to say that you're not doing it in the other areas, but certainly there's a very significant focus when you look at what we're spending money on those two areas. And then engagement and advocacy really link very much in that, but they're not as big budget items. So they're just kind of more staff resource items. And then understandably, a lot of our OCP related items are on hold for this year, but we will be providing some inputs into those changes in later years once we know exactly what's happening provincially. And then the downtown vibrancy, I think council is also investing in that, but again, not massive capital projects, but through a lot of things like the presentation we saw earlier today, where we're partnering with community groups and providing a lot of support in kind in that area. So as I mentioned, the annual work plan comes at this time when we're looking at budget, and every item that council has made decisions on or given direction to staff will have a corresponding budget amount. And then you don't really want to see a lot of changes going through here. And if there are changes, we actually have a process where we must amend the financial plan. And so at the end of every year, staff from finance bring that forward and show where those changes happen throughout the year. So one important change this year, and I think I mentioned it to council in the cover letter, sending you the actual work plan. For the longest, well, maybe for 2-3 years, we've been kind of budgeting or allocating our time based on an assumption that we have 6,000 hours. But that included 2 special project managers who were really 100% dedicated to council initiatives. And those positions have expired. So now we have, one was converted to the manager of parks, but they're not fully 100% allocated to council projects. They manage the day-to-day of parks. And so we do need to be mindful that we have a little bit less time. And in talking with my senior team, that time is more and more eroded with things like provincial demands that we have really very little control over, that really do change our day-to-day. There's just so many more things that are happening in that operational realm. So there's a challenge of balancing a one-off or a new project that council adds. And then a lot of our projects are multi-phase. So things like the wetlands management plan, our community park capital plan. So those things span over a couple of years. So in 2024, here's just a few highlights. There are a significant number of projects that were carried forward. I'll just move this out of the way. But I'm actually quite happy to see, so we had, as council remembers, we had a consultant come in and help us kind of track and put together the matrix for our work plan and estimate our capacity. And so we say that we have about 6,000 hours of time, and last year we completed 6,026 hours of projects. So I'm kind of happy to see that that assumption is correct. And of course, it's estimates, but it does give us a good sense of what we're able to achieve. We have 46 projects identified for 2024, and currently that's about 6,500 hours of time, given that those are proxies. So there's estimates. They're not exactly, we don't spend time tracking time because that seems inefficient. But we do have a lot of projects that what we've done this year is allocate a full FTE across multiple departments for those provincial requirements. And again, another sort of test of our assumptions is the province gave us a grant, essentially, that equates to almost a full FTE. So that 213,000 that Jetta will speak to in her presentation is just a little bit over what the cost with benefits for a full-time exempt director. So those things are kind of lining up and giving us some comfort in the model, I guess, that we're using. And so at the moment, with the work plan that we have, we are about 600 hours over before we consider the 25 projects that are on your handout, or before we deal with unforeseen things. There is an allocation put aside for the condition assessment. So I think we will be able to achieve some of those upgrades later in the year when we get that report.
Councillor Gore has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Kiva. Thank you. So just to clarify, the 6,000 hours that you mentioned for the staff time, is it for the entire work plan or the council initiatives annually? If you can clarify that, please.
Yes, thank you. If I may, through the chair, that's a really good question. So we only budget on the work plan for council projects. So this list does not include any of our day-to-day. And so just to kind of explain how we got there. So each position, when we worked with the consultant, we went through every position and guessed or estimated how much time that particular exempt person has to do council-related projects. So for example, the fire chief is only 5% because the fire chief isn't really able to do other things when there's a fire. That's what they're doing. But myself and the admin exempt are I'm at, I think, 30%, and the director of corporate admin is at 30% or 25%, depending on the year. So they would be the highest because we work the closest with council, and special projects that you put before us are often one of us doing them. So the operational items that we mentioned are increasing does take away from that ability for us to, like if a HR issue comes up or there's operational reporting, we can't not do that. So there is definitely a pressure on the time based on those day-to-day. So over the next few years, we'll probably have to refine that initial capacity. Like I'm saying, this year, we don't have the 6,000 hours. So that's just something to be mindful of, that our time crunch is different than previous years.
Thank you, Kiva. And just to add to that, 6,000 hours and for the benefit of the public as well, it's not that this council has put so much work on the staff, but we also have inherited previous council work plan that is ongoing.
Yes.
There's so many things that we would like to get done. I think we are a bunch of keeners here at this council table, but I do appreciate you clarifying the workload that you guys have. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I may, through the chair, we did mention at the last slide that there are the multi-year projects. And it is, I think, to your point, quite difficult to stop them halfway through when the money has been expended or there's already a plan in place. And so one of the things we'll talk about later is looking at that as maybe a way to manage the workload, is to have it be kind of a 2 or 3 year plan so that people can see their item or the thing they like on the plan, but it just might be a year out. Okay. Also, is a question here?
Councillor Wood, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, through yourself to our CAO. The provincial grant, I think it's $200,000+.
Yes.
That's a 1 year, one-off grant,
Yes.
obviously. And so
It
say
is.
we were to hire an FTE to handle the new legislation, what happens next year with that FTE?
Yeah, so thank you, if I may, through the mayor. Yeah, so the 213, although I would never say we're not grateful for money, it really isn't very helpful. Because we would not be able to hire a person for a year that is going to be able to land and do work for us really in an effective way. So you'll see we've allocated it to consultant support. So we've looked at putting some of the money, 100,000 of it towards the DCC review, and the other 100,000 towards some kind of consulting that will support planning in terms of getting through, whether it's drafting bylaws or researching what the legal implications are. And that is a one-time thing only. So we can't hire a person for that because next year we'd have to pay a significant amount. So, and it's not just one department. So there's 3 departments quite heavily impacted by the changes. So you'll see on the work plan, I have some items, but I've basically accumulated all of those hours and put a 1650, which is an FTE of time. And while I've got the discrete projects listed under finance and planning, the hours aren't really allocated to that one department, because I'm envisioning, like, we're going to have a committee that has 3 representatives from each department for everything. And that's because administration has to do the bylaws, planning has to figure out the content of the bylaws, finance has to look at the ongoing costs of doing those things, and like the housing reports and the DCC and economic analysis. So it's very challenging because you can't just hire one person. Even if council is willing to have that cost ongoing, there isn't a person that can do all of those 3 areas. So I think it's a good approach to try and offset what we would have had to tax people for those 2 projects. And Jetta will go into more detail on that on her slide. But I also know we do have some requests to council for FTEs, and some of those, all of them obviously are very critical, but one in particular, if we don't have that position, things are going to come to a little bit of a grinding halt in one department, which we've talked to council about already. But yeah, so it's great to get money from the government. Sometimes we've been getting unsolicited funds, and it's not as much of a boon as you would think, because it's not enough to really do anything with. Like, similar to the Indigenous consultation, we got money, but that doesn't really help solve the challenge of finding time to do that kind of work. So, but we're not going to give it back.
If I just may have one comment here. Thank you for that, Councillor Wood. This $213,000 to me is not actually to hire an employee actually to do it. I feel what it is the province is providing compensation to the municipality in this particular case to use our existing staff that we have that are trained, that can do all the things that Kiva spoke of, but recognizing that all the things that they're doing are now going to have to be put on hold. all the things that we had planned on our strategic plan have now just been moved back because we can't hire the people to do what the province is saying that they want all the reports on. We already have them here on staff, but they're already super busy. So now they're saying, the province is saying, we want to take over your staff to do the following. And here's 213 grand to make it a little easier to accept, because everything else is sliding back, because there's no way we can hire 1/8 of a person in this department, 1/4 of a person in this department. And that's exactly what is going to happen, because it's going to be our staff. But it's basically taking everything that they're doing and saying, okay, on hold, 6 months perhaps, like this. So it's compensating us, because we're going to be like, as Councillor Gore so aptly put it, we are a bunch of keeners and we have a very ambitious strategic plan. And now it's saying to us, hey, keeners, your plans are on hold because the provincial plans overrides your plans. And that's compensation. I feel it's just a compensation package. As CAO points out, we're not going to turn down any funding and so forth, because it helps reduce our tax burden, of course, which is always our goal at this table that we're always trying to be cognizant of. But it's an impossibility to hire staff for it, especially even in this employment culture that we have out there right now. Very difficult. So I think it's an interim measure, but it's going to affect us by our timetable of what we want to get things done. Sorry, Councillor Wood.
Follow-up question, Mayor, and probably through yourself to the CAO again, but if this grant is a 1-year, one-off grant, we're not sure what our next year financial plan will need for this provincial legislation either. And so I'd be curious to know what our ongoing costs will be besides just this 1 year that we're looking at. Thank you.
And Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and again, through to our CAO. I fully appreciate that it's not possible to never mind, hire someone for that period of time. I am curious to know if there are challenges with finding consultants who can help us in this work, because yeah, for me as well, it just seems that would be the way forward, at least until things stabilize. Is there any thoughts on that?
If I may, through the chair, yes, exactly. So if anyone has young people in their life, go to school to be a planner, because there will be many years of ongoing demands that all local governments will have to meet. So the legislation changes the frequency of reporting on things that normally for us, we do every sort of 7 years or so. In terms of OCP reviews that we allocate really significant funds, like $300,000 is kind of the going rate for a fairly basic OCP these days. We will now have to do that every 5 years, whether the council wants to or not. And we will also have to do housing reports pretty much every year. And then the housing report drives the OCP. So it takes a lot of decision-making power, I think, away from the local government. And we are required to fund that. So there's also the economic analysis for the amenities and the DCCs that, again, we usually do every sort of 7 years, 8 years as needed. We will be forced to do those ongoing. So we will look at kind of estimates of costs and bring that back to council at a later date. And I can warn council that it's probably going to need people as like ongoing permanent people, because the consultants are helpful to an extent, but you still have to manage the project and they don't have the context. And then you also have staff that haven't been involved, so they don't have the background to actually implement. So we use consultants for some discrete things that are kind of one-offs, but we try to balance that with internal support so that we have that corporate memory. So yeah, we have looked at all of the options. We will need consultants for some expert areas that we don't have in-house, but our staff will still be very much involved in overseeing and working with them on those things. So, okay, any more?
If I can just emphasize one very important statement that CAO Kaler just made. The housing reports will drive the OCP. Part of us think, oh great, we're going to get an updated OCP more frequently. How good could that be, right? But we know what's going to drive that. I think we're going to see the OCP become a very different document moving forward in this because of the housing mandate that's coming forth, and it's going to drive that OCP. And being on the OCP committee, I recognize that the OCP was for the community planning for the, and it was huge what it looked at. It's very well done. I fear that it's going to be taken over and circumvented to turn into a, where can we put the housing everywhere possible in our community? At what cost it's going to be to our community, I'm afraid of. I really am. And I'm afraid of all the good work that our planners have done for us in the past at creating a good community plan, creating a great community, not just the emphasis on housing, but taking the entire, everything that it takes to make a community. So I fear that that's the direction it's going. So we have to be very cognizant of that, and we have to have our effect with the provincial government where we can to advocate, to maybe say that the community plan should look at more of a wholesome picture, including housing, of course, but maybe including the whole package as well. That's the emphasis that we're going to have to do. So just realizing that, you know, like it may not be the OCP we want to see for the first couple of years, I can say. Thank you. Sorry,
Okay.
CAO.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. So the reality is that we really have zero capacity. Really, like I've had, you know, previous councils say, well, why didn't you tell us you don't have any staff? I do tell you often as a council and previous council as well. We are sometimes a little bit of a victim of our own success in that we make it work. Staff spend significant overtime. I've just been getting some reports of what that looks like. So our managers don't get paid for overtime, but we track time outside of their core hours. So we expect managers to work from 7:30 to 5. That's considered our core time, Monday to Friday. And then there's the odd time, obviously, that you'd have to work on a weekend as a manager. But when staff are working outside of those hours, I have them track it, just not to get compensated, but just so I know. And I have at least 3 exempt members of my senior team that are working more than half of an FTE of overtime, which is not sustainable. There's 1 or 2 that are working even more than that, and that is not healthy for anybody. That's going to push people out of working here or working at all. And while we are very fortunate that we have a lot of senior staff who are choosing to work, they don't have to work anymore. They've reached that age where they can choose to retire or work part-time or do whatever. Those are the things that will make people make decisions to move out of our out of working. So we're managing that. We do have a assessment, an exempt compensation and capacity review on the work plan for this year. That's an operational review. We do them kind of every 5 years, and we're up to do it this year. But I do want council to understand that while we've achieved more than we should have, I suppose, with previous work plans, I'm seeing that that's not sustainable, and I'm having people volunteer to move elsewhere or expressing a lot of stress to me. And so I am worried about that longer term if it continues without being managed. We also are seeing a lot of increased expectations from our stakeholders, from our, you know, our partners, from the community, from the senior governments, where it's sometimes to the individual, it might seem like just a small thing. You know, I do have sometimes people saying, oh, it's only a couple of hours 10 times a year, or it's only, you know, 2 or 3 weeks of staff time. But when you're already maxed, that there just isn't those couple of hours. And it's the cumulative impacts. And I think council also needs to understand that there are some service levels that are funded by the local government. There are some that are not. And we are also really seeing a lot of creep in terms of what people expect from us that are not funded. We're not taxing for those services. People are paying other levels of government for those services, and those levels of government are not delivering. And it's now looking or falling to us. And I think we'll talk a little bit further later on about core jurisdiction. And if council wants to provide those other services, it needs to fund them. So that's something that will, you know, as you bring things to us, we'll tell you the implications, and those decisions can be made. But we just can't continue kind of trying to do things off the side of our desk. It actually just doesn't benefit anybody and we end up doing things not as well as you would hope. So those are things that are pressures on our workforce, not unique to us, but certainly new things. So I'm going to skip over these because you already made the decisions on what to refine from previous meetings. We have another handout that the CFO will be discussing with you, and there's about 25 items on there. Some I would say are core function, some are not. And there's also obviously time implications for some of them. Some of them will just become part of our operational, but there's about an estimate of around 200 hours. If council were to approve all of those, which I don't think you will, but just to be mindful of that when you're reviewing the requests later on in the meeting. And so what I would recommend is that council use the work plan, use the budget when you're talking to your stakeholders and your constituents. And I think we should look at not adding new items in 2024. And in 2025 and 2026, my recommendation would be that we as a local government focus on the core jurisdiction. Your strategic plan outlines your priorities and explains those to the community, and I think was done right after an election. So that's when you were all hearing and very close to your constituents. And if you feel like it isn't reflecting your priorities, then it should be reviewed. But I think it's really a communication tool and an expectations management tool that you can speak to when people are asking you to bring things forward. And then if council is adding things, we really need to see them be replacing something that's on the existing work plan. So when you're bringing forward a motion or a notice of motion, I would encourage you to consider the priority and identify that when you're discussing the motion with council. Bring forward the funding that you think needs to be allocated. And then also looking at your strategic plan and look for items that tick off more than one box on the strategic plan. That would be ideal, but that are at least clearly linked to your strategic plan, and then funding those accordingly. So this is just a quick summary. We had this one come up earlier. So a few things that we are seeing as priorities already in the 2024 work plan. I'm not going to go through them all too much. We've talked about staff retention, and I think the last bullet there is really the one that I would focus. Council has seen this before, but I think we do need to be focusing a little bit on the need and must do's versus the nice to haves. We have a lot of investment that council has done in the last few years in the community park, in Memorial, on Macmillan, Corfield. There's been significant investment to beautify and enhance the quality of amenities in the city. And I think just to Councillor Martin's point earlier, there are some benefits from looking at those kind of must-dos. That being said, we do have some grant funding that the CFO will discuss that gives you a bit of wiggle room to do things that are those kind of capital investments without tax implications. So we'll talk about those a little bit later in the budget process. So just as I think council is aware, your job is to set the vision and the priorities for your term. And so we have a 5-year capital plan or a 5-year budget. So I definitely encourage council to look beyond the 1 year. And we're starting to do that a little bit organically, in that already council has deferred some items to 2025. So I think it makes sense to still indicate that those are important, but we just can't get to them right away. But it doesn't mean you're not going to support them next year or following year. So the options that we have discussed is you either, as a council, you refine the work plan and take things off and focus on the priorities of those items that you're leaving on the plan, or increasing capacity, which I actually don't recommend. I think it sounds like it would solve some things, but there's a lot of challenges around increasing capacity outside of the cost. The obvious one is the cost, but there are many other challenges around recruiting the right people. We're actually quite pinched for space in terms of where those people would be. And then there's implications around managing extra resources. So if exempt staff are already very taxed, if you start adding people, then that creates challenges of itself. And eventually you need to have more managers. So I don't think we're there yet. I think a more sort of diligent review of what gets added and the multi-year planning, which we talk a little bit about in option 3, I think that will actually allow us to achieve a lot of what this council would like to see. But you just have to be mindful that it's not all going to happen in 2024. If we spread it out throughout your term, then I think it's more manageable. And so almost at the end here, I think applying the applying the strategic plan focus areas will help. And so what we have talked about a little bit with council is focusing on some of the areas. Right now, we have a heavy investment in the water management and in recreation. And then in the latter parts of your term, you may want to focus on some of the other areas. Or those capital investments might be just what you wanted to do for your entire term. But the other piece of that is it's very important for us to get an understanding of priorities. So the 46 items on the list have no priority right now. So staff doesn't have direction on which of these items you want us to spend the time on first. So we just kind of spend the time on them as we can. And internally, we've tried to do some prioritizing about what we need to do first. So if there's prerequisites, research, the condition assessments would be a good example. We would then be doing the capital plan upgrade after that. So there is some logical sequence, but I think new items or items that council is, really wants to see us focus on, we would need that direction from you, either when the item gets added or when we're reviewing the plan. And so I encourage council to look at items that might be not started yet that are like 1%, 5%, 1%, 20%. If one of those or some of those are your most important projects, then we would need direction from council to kind of invest more time on those ones. All right, so that's it from me, and you have the handout. What we had done at the previous meeting is we would just give the yellow list of projects to the public on Let's Talk Parksville once it's confirmed, and then that ties with the budget, and we don't provide the notes about like the details of the project to the public, but they could ask questions of council and see the big project list on the 46 projects that are currently on there, if that's what ends up being on there at the end of the budget discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mayor. If you could go back about 4 slides, I think, Kiva, where you talk about the 9 FTEs. Maybe more than 4. Yes. So currently, this is saying that we are 9 personnel short in the whole organization.
Not in the whole organization, if I may, through the mayor. So when I mentioned that we have a capacity assessment, so each of the exempt, like senior level managers have, we have a table with their names, and we have an estimate of how much time they can spend each year. And on average, it's 247 hours. And as I mentioned, some are less. So the fire chief is less. So like the mayor, the executive assistant is less because they don't have any time that's not fully allocated in a day. But on average, it's about 247 hours of time that you're not, as a director, you're not spending that time on your day-to-day, on managing people, on managing your budgets, on doing your projects. Because as I've mentioned, all of our managers are working managers. We don't have people that are just sitting there delegating things. They're all working on projects as well, whether it's research projects or policy or writing bylaws or writing reports. So 250 hours is what each director on average would be able to spend on a council initiative that's outside of their day-to-day. So if you look at how many hours of projects we have at 6,600, we have about 4,200 hours. So we're short 9 people. Unless you hire the type of person where they're 100% committed, like we've had in the past. We had term positions that were a project, basically their whole job was responding to council projects. So if it's just hiring a manager, you can only really expect that they have about 240 hours a year to do these new one-off kind of like not a recurring project. So
Right.
That's where that.
No, thank you. So when you say recommended FTE positions to maintain service level, that's the one in the handouts that we have? The 3? Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks.
Gotcha. Carry on. Thank you. Okay, any further questions, council? No, okay, so I think we had motion at the end. I'll swing back.
So if I may, the CFO is now going to get some direction from council on those items that have been discussed throughout the budget process, and this is the decision point for them. So I'll just turn things over to you, Jed.
I believe that I'd like to move to receive your report first, and then we'll bring Jen up if I could. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that the verbal update from CEO Kaler regarding the corporate work plan be received? Moved by Councillor Gore, seconded by Councillor Beal. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you, that is carried. The next report is from our Director of Finance for the financial plan proposals for council review and direction. Ms. Holmes, welcome.
I'm gonna turn that on. Good morning. I think you all have a 11 by 17 sheet that's going to summarize the discussions today. And those are all of the points. Do you not have one?
Oh, the work plan? Oh, yes, I do. Yes, yeah, sorry, yeah. For larger.
Yeah, the font is small just because we've got a lot of kind of moving pieces on this one. So what this sheet does is summarize all of the kind of decision items that have been either brought to you in delegations or have been items that you've identified or items that we've identified as staff through the financial planning process. And so what we're looking for today is direction from you, whether to include them in the 5-year financial plan or not. And then the next step would be for me to pull all of those together into the provisional financial plan that would then result in bylaws coming back to you for 3 readings and approval. So if we could just start working through those, and we've got a correction already on one just as a result of a delegation earlier today, and we'll kind of identify those as we go. We've got our manager of finance today, Marley, is going to track this in the spreadsheet. So if council is making changes to things, we can make them live kind of real time and understand what any impact to property tax increases might be. And so it will be easier to kind of make a decision one by one so that you have an understanding of that, unless you say we're happy with all of those and then we can move forward with that. So we can just go through those one by one. What I would also just comment is just in terms of our new process, in terms of adopting a financial plan earlier in the year and then doing our tax rates bylaw later in the year. Today is the day that we would be looking for pretty final decisions on these things, and that when it comes back to you in April or May would be things that are new information at that time. So we wouldn't kind of look for this, so we'll make a decision on this in April or May. We're trying to kind of move those projects along and decisions along so that the work plan and the items that have been identified in the financial plan have more months in the year to be achieved, if that makes sense. Okay. This is just our carry forward slide that kind of identifies where we are in the process. So today is cumulative analysis on these items and bringing those back to you for direction. So as a reminder, those initial financial plans that were presented to you reflected the core activities of the city and priced at what we think it will cost to deliver those services in the current year. And that includes significant maintenance of assets and replacements of assets where we had identified risks or safety contexts based on some of the work we've been doing with our assets recently. And so we also need to remember that additional resources are sometimes required just as a result of a growing population. So we're delivering the same services, but to more people. And so there may be a cost increase just as a result of that. This is where we are today based on the financial plans that you've received. So included in the general fund was a 5.2% total property tax increase, comprised of the 4.7% for operations and then a half percent increase that would go towards the infrastructure deficit capital reserve. And so that was something that was approved by council 5 years ago to have that incremental 0.5%. And so that's what's included right now in the plan. The water and sewer, water had a 5% increase included in the plan, which is approximately $15 to a kind of average household user. And then the sewer financial plan had a 3% increase in user fees, which is about $6. So in total, we're looking at $156 total for an average residential property that has those services. So that's where we're starting from.
Councillor Gore?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just to point out something here on the right, the 2024, why does it say 3.5 property? Should be 4.7, right?
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. I'm off by 1 year in that chart, so appreciate that. Yeah, they're all off by 1 year. Shift it up one. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out because changes that come forward from today are either going to add or subtract from those starting points, okay? So also just to point out what is already included in that 5.2% are items that have been approved in prior years as increased service levels. And those were and include a benefits program for our paid on-call volunteers. And that was something that was approved previously by council. In the current year, that's at a cost of $40,000. That's already worked into that rate increase. As you know from our previous discussions, we have one more career firefighter that will be added in the current year. That's already included, that additional service levels already included in this increase. And then an additional RCMP member in the current year. So those were prior increases to service levels that were approved and have been just carried forward. Again, looking at where we're looking ahead at 5 years, that percentage increase was already included. Okay.
Thank you. And to be clear, so all three of those are already included in that 4.7.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so as we've discussed before, when we're looking at core versus new service levels, the things that we're going to talk about today are additional things beyond our core activities. And so there are things that have come from council direction or staff recommendations. We only had one, what we would call a spending proposal from staff, and that was that additional vehicle for our facilities. Other things are just coming forward as a result of various conversations with council over our financial planning meetings. Some of them have been carried forward for decision from prior years as well. What we've tried to do in the spreadsheet here is identify what we would recommend as funding, as the funding for these items. There are alternatives though that council may wish to discuss, and we can advise you on that as well. The one kind of grant fund that does have some amounts available in it is the Growing Communities Fund. The gas tax, as you'll recall, is mostly allocated within the financial plan. We do have an amount to discuss today, but this is an area where council may want to consider if there's projects that are eligible to be funded through the Growing Communities Fund, you may want to consider allocating those funds. They do have to be spent within 5 years from when we received it in 2023. So looking to be by the end of this financial plan. Unlike the gas tax, though, I don't think the province is looking to see it committed within the financial plan. So we could still leave it as unspent, but I just wanted to bring you up to speed on where we're at on this. So we did receive 4.789 million. We had amounts that were committed in last year's financial plan that left about 2.7 million in there. Was in the current financial plan, 150,000 allocated to the antenna for the emergency services program. And so that leaves about 2.539. And so today, as we're going through some of these, that may be a funding alternative for you if amounts are eligible. What I would point out to you is that when you're using grant funds like this, it means that those funds are either not being shown as an increase in property taxes or as a decrease in other reserves that have been accumulated. So the longer we can leave our reserves in accounts right now at higher interest rates and accumulating interest gives more decision-making power going forward. I think we're all aware that there's a lot of asset information coming back, and we'll have a better idea of kind of what our infrastructure deficit is. And so some of those funds then could be directed towards addressing some of those assets. as a reminder, there's a lot of different areas that the Growing Communities Fund can be applied to. They are mostly capital though. And so that's something to keep in mind if we're looking at any capital projects today or going forward. This was the summary that we looked at last week with respect to the general fund. And as you can see, the recurring, net recurring income from our revenue sources and expenditures just about covers the non-recurring expenditures. And so we're at a very kind of small deficit for 2024. If there are amounts that aren't funded, essentially what has been done historically is there's a transfer from unrestricted surplus to essentially balance the budget because we can't have a deficit in our budget. And so what you see there is we have a small transfer from unrestricted surplus of 11,400 in 2024 to balance the financial plan to zero. In 2023, that transfer amount was 525,000. And what we discussed was that in prior years, there has been this significant transfer from unrestricted surplus, and it was typically to cover some of these one-time items. I think it's important to look at what they are to be sure we're not subsidizing it too much from unrestricted surplus with respect to operating items, because that just will dig us a hole with respect to property tax increases. So if today you want to recommend going ahead with these, either we're going to have an increase in property taxes or use of other funding, or we'll increase that non-recurring amount and have an additional amount from unrestricted surplus. So again, important to understand that if it's a recurring item that we're looking at today, it would be good to contemplate an increase in property taxes so that we understand the real cost of delivering the basic level of services, or an increased level of service as it may be today. If they're one-off type items, considering other non-recurring types of income is certainly appropriate in the circumstance. A couple of points just with respect to, the consideration of using grant funding more than property taxes where we have eligible projects is, I just wanted to let you know, in our current financial plan, we actually have been included a lot of grant funding, more so than in prior years, and Parksville's done quite well in some cases in getting additional grant funding. And as our CAO mentioned, sometimes we receive funding that we maybe necessarily didn't expect or need. But in our general fund capital, we're funding our capital expenditures, which if you recall, were about $7.8 million. 35% of that is grant funded. Of our minor capital projects, 43% of those were grant funded. And so there is a lot of grants already included, and it's good to take advantage of those right now while they're available. That doesn't include our operating grants, our small communities grant, and our traffic sharing. Okay, just a suggestion that as we're moving through, as I said, we could deal with the items one by one if council wants to make a decision, or if there's a bundle of them that you want to go ahead, but it would be easier for our corporate admin folks that are keeping track of the resolutions, as well as for our manager of finance to track the decisions. If you refer to the numbers along the side to say this specific item funded by whatever it is it's going to be funded by, be incorporated into the financial plan. So that gives us the direction that we need from council to move to next steps on this. Okay.
Councilor Gore has a question.
More of a suggestion, Mayor. Thank you. I would like for us as a council, since it will be a final decision today, that will likely impact the property tax bylaw, that we do it individually, if that's okay with the council members, each item.
Yeah, and I understand what Councilor Gore is saying is like, let's look at each one of these individual, let's not try grouping, let's individually, let's do it properly. And so nothing gets lumped in with something else. Okay.
Okay.
Good to go. Councilor Martin, sorry, you had your hand up. Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, the first slide shows that first bundle of requests, and those were all either council initiatives or items that were brought to council as a request. So we can just work through those one by one. Overall, these would accumulate to 1.6% property tax increase. However, that said, we've already had a change on the BC Culture Days number. So when we get to that, we can talk about what that number is and how that would be a different impact. So the first is the Parksville Beach Festival has requested an additional 2,500 with respect to 2024 funding only.
Okay, thank you. And then if we will just carry on, may I carry on as chair anyways, and just call them out, or did you want to do it, Jen? Okay, yeah.
I'm okay either way.
Okay, I was just going to say, just so we can keep going on it, so I'll keep the conversation going. Thank you. And so on the very first one, I just wanted to, for clarity for council anyways, that they're asking for a 2,500%. So currently they receive 5,000.
Yes.
Yes, so they're asking for a total of 7,500. So we're all clear on that, council. Comments, Councillor Gore.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And being a liaison with the Beach Fest, I understand those fine folks do a great job of putting up this event for our community. I do recall you mentioning we cap all our funding at 5,000 to the various groups. I'm not sure if we are continuing with that, or have you changed your mind? I just want to put it out there.
Council discretion.
Okay.
So the ask here is for 2,500. Council, we're going to make a decision right here, right now. So Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to ask the liaison what his thoughts are on increasing it to $2,500.
So I understand it's just asking about this, but since we did again talk about the grants in aid amount being again set back to 5,000, and if we are trying to be fair and equitable, I think we need to be starting off with even with Beach Fest. I'm okay if we keep it at 5,000 for sure.
Okay.
And I do want to mention, Mayor, as we start this list, I know Jenna mentioned a 5.2% tax increase is what we are starting off with, but not to forget the RDN, the hospital, and the library. So it's more like 6.5 is our working number. We're starting off with 6.5% for a household. It could be more, but that's just my guess. We're not starting off at a 5.2%, just so you know. Thank you.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And although we don't have the specifics in front of us here as to why the increase in the request for funding for Beach Fest, I still value the work that they do in our community. And if that could be addressed, that would be great. I understand that costs have gone up for so many things. And I also really appreciate that the money that the profits beyond, once their costs are covered and their seed money is there for the following year, that the remaining funds come back directly to organizations in our community. So I suspect that they actually lead to a decrease in requests for aid from a number of organizations in our community. So I would really like to support them in their requests. But again, is there specifics that you can add to why they need this additional funding?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Councillor Gore has an answer to the increase.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's about the sand. I think the cost of the sand that they need has gone up, is directly related to that.
Thank you for that, Councillor Gore. And I would like to echo anyways at this point. I'm in favor of the increase of 2,500 just for it's a cost increase to perform their duties anyways, which relies heavily on sand. And it was definitely an increase in cost like all of us face and everything else. And that's why our budgets have gone up. Their budget has gone up as well. And it was for that sand factor. And it's always the situation. And it's sand is rare on Vancouver Island now, any sand, but their particular sand that they use anyways is very rare. So I'm supporting it because I want them to continue to be successful on this. And I recognize they're really not like the other community organizations in our community as such as that they are so all-encompassing the economic impact that they have. Although the other community associations are very important, the Beach Fest is so over and above the top anyways to providing economic benefit for our people and to the community organizations that support Beach Fest by taking part at the gate and then getting contributions back to their organizations. As you say, that may be a little less stressful on our grants, so we actually give them because they're receiving a summer. So it's including the community is what I like. So I know Beach Fest management well enough that if they didn't need it, they wouldn't ask for it. And that's what I have the confidence. I've never seen such a well-organized association. So I'm supporting it at this particular time, my own feeling. Councillor Martin? We're talking like there is a motion on here. We just want to get everybody's feeling on the floor first.
Would like.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you,
Councillor.
Mr. Mayor. Each society organization comes to us, and this one is, like the mayor was saying, for one thing. Does that mean next year there'll be 7,500? Or is it 5,000 next year? Just, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a one-off for sand, right?
through the mayor. Yeah, we would bring it back to 5,000 again next year. If you recall, last year, we also provided an extra 2,500. It came back down to 5. And then this is looking for that incremental
Then
amount
the
again.
request again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other comments? Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'd just like to add that I do understand that the sand is preserved and stored, but that also additional sand may be used. And also they're looking at, although it wouldn't be this year, but the eventual relocation of Beach Fest. And perhaps that will in some way help with minimizing the need for increased amounts of sand each year. So I echo the mayor's comments. I have great faith in their ability to manage and would want to support this.
And thank you for that, Councillor Beal. Then for clarity, yes, the Beach Fest have indicated with the city's participation to relocate the sand sculpting site to it's just long and short down to the kite field. That's what we call here the area, but not for this year, not for 2024. We don't want any construction in 2024 in that park if we can avoid it. And but they have definitely said for 2025 we'll be looking at long-term plans, and it gives us lots of time so we can come up with a comprehensive plan that addresses it properly, and which could probably maybe even conserve the sand that we receive each year rather than have it migrate from where the current sand it has, current site it does right now. Thank you. Councillor Gore?
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to mention this to the council members that giving this additional 2,500 or not giving this $2,500 in one way or the other does not undermine our appreciation for what Beach Fest does. What I was saying was with the 5,000 consistency, we are saying, hey, this is what we are giving to other organizations. We are being consistent with everybody. Will Beach Fest not be able to hold the event if we don't give them 2,500? I highly doubt that, because they're able to give $80,000 back to our community. It's more about sponsorship, that we as a city sponsor this event. And I think I would support 2,500 since the mayor mentioned about the new site. And I can recall that the society talking about possibility of recycling and reusing the sand. So I think hopefully this will be a one-time ask and not be a additional $2,500 next year again. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody like to put a motion forward to Councillor Gore? Go ahead.
Just approve the additional 2,500. Thank you.
I think it's seconded by Councillor Wood. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. That carries. Just as an example of this is we just approved $2,500, and it can't come out of the growing community funds because this would be operating, not capital. So did we just increase our percentage?
Yes.
By?
0.01%.
Okay, I'm going to track this. So
Okay,
go ahead.
and our manager of finance is also tracking.
Oh, good.
it.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you. Okay, so what was that for this first one?
0.01%.
0.0. I don't
It is
see that.
on one column.
It's on the fine print, 0.01. Right. Thank you. Thank you. Number two, regarding, do you have more information, or do you want to just, does everybody understand the Mabry, the increase to the annual funding? Number two, council, do you understand what that is? Go ahead.
Well, if I could
Shanda?
just
Yes.
interject, unlike Beach Fest, which was asking for a one-time increase, Mabry is looking for $2,500 annual. So that would be an ongoing increase of $2,500 each year. And so it would be a 0.01% increase in each year rather than just in 2024.
Thank you. So they're currently receiving,
They currently receive $5,000.
Right.
So this would move them up to $7,500 annually. And part of that, when they, if you recall, they were a delegation to council early on in the financial planning process, and they've taken over the Brant Festival as well. So that's their request.
yes, but as I recall anyways, I actually asked for an increase in the Brand Festival as well. I seem to recall. Did they not on the Brand Festival? Yeah, that's right. So in this particular case, yes.
I think it's one and the same.
Is it? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. One and the
Yeah.
same, the Brand Festival, okay.
Right. This is Brant
Okay.
Festival and Mabry, one and the same item.
Okay, that's right. Okay, so,
Because historically, the Brant Festival has been a line item at $5,000. We've not had Mabry in the financial plan
Okay.
before. Right, it's really moving it over to them and increasing the
okay,
amount.
so now Brand Festival funding is going to become Mabry Brand Festival funding.
Right,
But not just for Mabry. Okay, thank you
Correct.
very much for that. So it's increasing it. Yeah, okay, thank you. I just want to, just making my notes as we're going along here. So 2,500 more in addition to the 5,000 that was already the line item. So in this particular case, as to Councillor Gore's previous case, I do not support this $2,500. I note that the Brant Festival is actually a lesser time duration than what the previous ones were. So I'm prepared to leave the grant at this time to 5,000 mile. Yeah, I'll take an open discussion. Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, I just want to. Councillor Beal, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, I would hesitate. I would not be in support of this being increased going forward. I understand that this is the first year that Mabry is taking over the Brant Festival, and also it is being, the time frame is being adjusted. I would like to see what they can do for this year, and that hopefully with this change, there will be a kind of a relaunch and revitalization of the festival. So I absolutely would not want to automatically say that this increase would go forward for future years. I think that we'd want to see what they can do and have them come back and present to council. I'm not necessarily against this increase for this particular year, seeing as how that it is a new one for them and they're getting into that. But perhaps someone else here has more information about what their needs would be.
Councillor Martin?
I'm just, what Councillor Beal has said is because it's new for them, I can see them feeling that they need more funds, but ongoing, no. It's a major passover from Nature Trust. So I think that I would support the cost for it because of the change, but ongoing, we have to have a limit. And I would support this 1 year, period. I don't have any more information though.
Thank you. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question through you to staff. Does the amount here also contemplate sort of what may be considered in-kind support from the city staff on the Brant Festival?
through the mayor, no, this is a direct cash payment that they're looking for. These amounts don't include any amount of staff support.
Thank you. So something I've just noticed in the discussion here, it might be nice to, I'm not sure what staff thoughts are on this, but to have a better idea of what in-kind actually looks like to attach a dollar figure. Because I do recognize the staff does a considerable amount of work on a number of these initiatives that isn't necessarily calculated or isn't shown as a dollar figure. It's a number of things come up just this meeting today about where staff has supported various efforts in the community, but we don't necessarily monetize that and put a dollar figure to it. So I'd love to see that personally. It'd be helpful for me to understand.
Through the mayor,
Yes.
at our very first financial plan meeting, so I think November 27th, we did have a slide up that talked about some of the major events and trying to estimate the staff support time. We've set up a number of new tracking codes to try and fine tune that so that we have a better idea. Some of those things we track are like event type things. We have some tracking of hours spent on, say, Springwood Field in general or community park fields in general, not necessarily for baseball or for soccer or for track and field or whatever it may be. So we do have some estimates of those numbers for the events. And that said, I don't think we have one for Brant Festival. I don't know. We'd have to follow up on what amount of staff support is provided to that specifically. We do track it for Beach Fest and other significant events. So we'll continue to do that.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, follow up. Thank
Counselor.
you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And if that's something that's improving and moving forward, that's great to see that if there's a bit more tracking. From my own business, my team tracks, we all track our time based on projects. So I can bring up a report quite easily to see, oh, we spent this much time on this project. And I think in terms of how to allocate our resources, we're clearly at capacity or over capacity. So it's helpful to know if specific projects are maybe adding a lot of burden of staff time, then that helps us also know what additional funds might also go towards that project or what maybe is being offset by staff time that's not really accounted for in the actual budget. So thank you very much.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thinking about this particular request, I'm also thinking about the fact that the Brant Festival takes place in what I would call, an off-season time, which I appreciate. I think that's beneficial to our community as a whole. It allows opportunity for our residents to get out and get involved, but also should bring a number of people to the area and be an economic boost, hopefully, with their plans to revamp this. I also appreciate that there is a focus on environment and caring for the environment, which I think is important to people in Parksville. And that also it encourages people and that the types of activities by and large are taking place outdoors, for a healthy community. I think that we all see the value in getting outdoors, although they also generally have some indoor components as well. So I think it doesn't take too much of a stretch to tie this into some of our recreation goals. So for that reason, and again, as a 1 year, one-off, I would like to support this.
Okay, do you want to put a motion through? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I hope the public appreciates how much time you're spending on these little items. It's only $2,500 ask. I do agree with what Councillor Beal is saying. Environmentally, I try to be very conscious, make my own decisions based on what's best for the environment personally. However, again, my job here sitting at this table is being a good steward of people's money, property tax that we are taxing them. I'm not sure how, again, exactly to tie this to the core functions that our staff was referring to. Again, must have, nice to have. I'm happy to support $5,000 that we've been doing. Any additional $2,500 I can support ongoing. And Councillor Grenz mentioned about the staff time and the in-kind support that we provide. Again, and so many initiatives that we do, including the Beach Fest, and the society is very cognizant of how much staff time is involved in supporting, which cannot be quantified by like $7,500 support, way more than that. And last year was a big example of how the staff was scrambling to make sure the washrooms were running and things were happening smoothly. So I am not going to support the additional $2,500 for this. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take you to the motion here, Sylvia, if we could. I'd like to put a motion through to not support this at this time. Seconded by Councillor Gore. Any further discussion?
I would
Councillor
also
Maxwell.
like to say this Brant Festival is, and I'd forgotten this, is the children are involved in this. And it's a very good time of year for children because it's not in the middle of the summer when all the people are here and tourists, because they are in the classrooms now this next year. So I would think that would be a benefit too, and I will support this motion. I will not support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I do appreciate Councillor Gore's reference to anything that's increasing taxes. I too actually do really consider that a lot. But the other comment, I'm not aware of any staff time that's taken up with the Brant Festival, having lived here for many years, but I realize that it is going to look a bit different this year, but I'm not aware of staff time or grants in kind.
Thank you. All those in favor of the motion on the floor? That is for all those opposed. Councillor Martin and Councillor Beal opposed. Thank you. That carries. Introduce number 3, if you could. Jana.
Okay, thank you. So the next item is BC Culture Days, which initially we had brought forward a request for 29,000, which the delegation clarified today that they're really only looking now for $9,850, as well as a letter of support. So I think in this motion, if that council decides to move ahead with that, we also include the letter of support as part of the motion as they requested if council chooses.
I think at this particular time, I think we need to, we've talked about deferring this to a budget meeting, one more budget meeting. Did we not? We talked about it because we have a separate budget just for, instead of the entire 29,000 for the Culture Days, we have a budget for where the Art Culture Center was suggesting that we just sponsor 1 or 2 events type of thing. So that would be a line item that we could debate. But we don't have that. Well, we can bring it up on the slide right now if we want. Do you want to do it that way? Do you want to handle it just like that right now? Okay, let's do that right now. Thanks, Amanda. If we could bring up the budget for the arts and culture. And so instead of just a blanket 29,000 as indicated here, we'll be looking at approving possible sponsorship of 1 or more events of BC Culture Days. Thank you. That was awfully quick. Thank you, Amanda. Okay, so here we have, as I recall from the discussion today, they suggested that maybe the city of Parksville wanted to sponsor the opening ceremony and community murals project for $6,000. And did anybody recall that the other one was the banners? Yeah, Councillor Beal, thank you. I'm looking for that. Yeah, 1,500. 75, I got 1,500. Oh, 7,500 total. Well, you're just calculating ahead. Okay, gotcha. Okay, so that would be $6,000 for the first item, and for the banners would be 1,500 for a grand total of $7,500. If council wants to take it separately, or would you like to consider those 2 items, and so we have a finite number? Okay, Councillor Grants, go ahead.
Thank you. So personally, my preference on this would be to allow for $5,000 of support to match more in line with what we've done with other events. And also, I think there's still more opportunity, hopefully, for sponsorship for this event from the private sector, perhaps, as well as I can think Parksville Qualcomm Community Foundation, perhaps. So that's why I would say 5,000 and a letter of support would be my preference.
And I think that's a really good compromise. I really do. I think it has merit. Definitely exactly what you're saying from the discussion so far. Any further discussion on that before I just call for a motion?
If I,
Yes,
if I could
yeah,
add
yes.
one
Go
thing to
ahead.
this, so currently in your chart, it's showing us funded by property tax increase.
Yeah.
In a prior year, it was funded out of council contingency, so that's also something that council may consider if they want, or it could go out of property taxes as shown on the sheet. It isn't a capital item, so some of those grant funding opportunities wouldn't be applicable here.
And since that is in 2024 council contingency, if we were to support $5,000, there's sufficient funds in 2024.
Right, it would reduce the 25,000 that would otherwise be
Yes.
available
Sure.
for council contingency.
I would support that, Mayor. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Beal?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering if perhaps we could take these items similarly, separately. I see that the mural project, which I do think fits in quite nicely with some of our strategic plan priorities, is for $6,000. And as a standalone, it would mean that city would be the sponsor for the community murals project, and also understanding that this particular year, this is not some aspects of this are recurring. However, this particular year, Parksville has been chosen for the whole province to be the hub city, and we'll be getting a lot of publicity, et cetera, on that regard. But going back to the murals, this mural would be a permanent fixture that involves young people in the creation of the mural, and then the art with the guidance of the artist, who then adds touches to bring it all together. I'm sure all of us are aware of the tile mural. I guess it's sort of a mural that's out in the atrium here. But so I would like to see us at the very least consider the mural project, and that's what I would like to see us support at a minimum.
Yes, I understand the value of that, Councillor Beal. However, it was lumped in with opening ceremony and community murals project. I would guess that the $5,000 that we're considering would actually cover the murals. The opening ceremony, I'm not always a big fan of providing like for a ceremony type of thing, an opening, like a reception and so forth. But for something that's actually a capital project like the community murals project, I believe that, I would suspect that maybe their opening ceremony, they probably allocated, say, $1,000 and then $5,000 to murals. I would guess, but I think that we'd cover the lion's share of a murals project with a $5,000 contribution. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. I like the idea of keeping it even with the $5,000, but I also like Councillor Beal's idea of kind of taking one of those items off the list and owning it as a city, since this is, we are chosen as a hub city. So this is not an ongoing thing. We should feel quite special that we've been chosen as a city of Parksville. So taking that $5,000 that we do tend to hand out to different organizations and adding $1,000 to be able to own the opening ceremony and the community murals project, that seems like a nice compromise, along with Councillor Grenz's letter of support. So we go a little bit beyond our regular $5,000 just because Parksville has been chosen this year amongst all the other cities that the province could have chosen. Thank you.
Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mayor. I really support art and culture and everything. I think it's great. I mentioned it before, it brings the community together. But I also like fairness. I also like being consistent, managing expectations. So I would support 5,000. And just so the council knows, it also says proposed budget. We are not looking at invoices. This is not definite 6,000. It's not a cost. This is what they're estimating. I think being consistent is important for us going forward. I appreciate Councillor Wood's comments. I think $5,000 and top it up with the letter of support. I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'd just like to add, I honestly do not think that the opening ceremony aspect of that is increasing much of the cost beyond the mural. My understanding is that in a previous year, whatever the event was at the first day was held outdoors. And then a storm came in and the wind came in. And so out of that, out of a sort of an abundance of caution, if you like, the organizing committee has booked the Jensen Center in order to start and have this mural project get going. And so, yes, that is some ways a separate cost, but it is to address that possibility of inclement weather. So that was a huge factor, and hence it's considered to be an opening ceremony. But that is it's all to do with the mural project.
Councilor Martin?
I think the rationale here for having that privilege of them being here this one time for British Columbia is a good thing to support this extra this time. This way we would have the publicity for that as a city too. So I support the $6,000 and the letter. So thank you very much. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And Councilor Grenz, do you have a motion?
Yeah, I kind of sort of moved it, but I'd like to move 5,000 plus the letter of support. It's going to take a long time if we have this much debate on every item here on this list. I would make the final point, though, that we did in 2022, not this council, previous council, though, did allocate almost $30,000. So that's a lot of money and a short time ago. So I think 5,000 is pretty generous. Lots of opportunity for them to fundraise still.
Do I have a seconder for that? Second by Councilor Gore. Okay, let's call the question. All those in favor of the mark? Thank you. It's all in favor of $5,000 plus. That passes unanimous. Thank you. Oh, yes. Yeah, it mentioned as council contingency for 2024, which equals zero effect on tax increase.
That's correct.
Thank you. Introduce number 4, if you could, Jenna.
Amanda, can you get us back on the other slideshow? Thank you.
And as a reminder, council, we're trying to target 12 o'clock. We have 25 minutes. So we're going to have to limit the comments to very basic, only new information, not just rehashing our own personal feelings. Thank you.
Can I make a motion then that we accept the recommendation on item 4 there?
On the rebates?
The recommendation on here is to reduce the rebates with a current, with a 3-year rolling average amount.
I'll just, for your information, this is where that amount comes from. So it would be reducing each of the rebates down to a proposed amount as shown there, with the total savings being about $12,000. Just for clarity, that it includes all of them.
Seconded by Councilor Gore. All those in favor? Thank you. Number 5.
Number 5 is the VIEAA attendance by all of mayor and council. The annual cost is estimated at $14,000. Currently, I believe just the mayor attends.
Yes. Yeah. Currently, the mayor has attended in the past, and one other time by exception by previous council, one of the other council members attended as well. It came up this year anyways that others would like to attend. And so to do that, we have to take out the maximum amount as if all 7 of us attended type of thing. And that's the amount of 56,000. Just comments on that. If we can keep it briefly, I would appreciate that. Councilor Gore.
Thank you, Mayor. Just quickly, we've been arguing over $1,000 and now we're talking $14,000. I would stick to the previous practice of the mayor and by resolution and other council members. So I will not support this 14,000 increase. Thanks. Councilor
Grant.
I would like to actually move that we take this out of council contingency. And then if we need it, because then it makes it more flexible, I think.
So you're suggesting that we go for the full amount as presented, but it would be taken out of council contingency as needed basis. Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Wood. All those in favor? Thank you. No net tax increase come from contingency. Thank you.
If I could just note for council then, your total council contingency is 25,000 and we've taken out 5 down to 20. If everyone went, that would leave you with 6.
Yes.
However, if not everyone went, then there would be some room left, okay?
Sorry? A revote with the information now. So we're going to ask for a revote on the contingency. That wasn't really any information. I just have to say, why do you want to oh, you want to oppose it? Well, how about you just change your vote to oppose it? That's okay. So why don't we do that? Okay, it still carries, Councillor Gore opposes. Thank you. Carry on to number 6, if you would, please.
Okay, the item that was brought forward was the snow clearing equipment for downtown and priority sidewalks. Cost is estimated at 125,000, and then an annual operating amount of about 12.5 would be the 50,000 is the annual operating over 4 years. So in 2024 it'd be 125,000.
Okay, and I'll speak to this right away because as you know, it's a big push anyways on the snow clearing equipment. I, at this time, would like to just take this item and not delete it, but I would like to defer it for consideration for 2025. Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. The next one is the Parksville Beach Festival relocation within, oh, it's in here. Okay. Yeah, number 7. Go ahead, Jenna.
Okay, so this is an idea that there was a delegation early in the financial planning process of the idea of this. And so I think the understanding was only part of it would happen in 2024 and the move would happen for 2025 was what was proposed. A couple of ideas here. One is that obviously could be funded from property taxes. But if you recall, there's about $200,000 left in the council allocated contingency related to community park projects that was authorized for this year. So an idea might be to fund this relocation out of that contingency amount, which would be no incremental property taxes. It would be just part of the remainder of that contingency that was already approved for the community park. I think it's quite consistent with what council contemplated with the use of those contingency funds in terms of looking at the community park overall and how it works together and making sure that it all ties together.
If I may, if I recall, Graham had mentioned anyways that $200,000 about possibly using it for items for the original gathering place that had been put on the back burner. But then he came in under budget. And so he came to us with a presentation suggesting that he could easily put those back into the formula. And I think we kind of give him a nod to, yeah, that's a good idea. In fact, I would be surprised if he hasn't actually placed a purchase order for the furniture, or it was just lighting to actually complete the gathering place. So I'm really hesitant because that money was allocated for the gathering place, and to take it and now suggest it goes into the Parksville Beach Festival relocation plan, I think that would be not wise, because especially the fact that it was grant funding in the first place.
So listed on here is the decision about the 200,000. So
Is it coming down here?
Right. Our manager of parks has not made any movement on spending that additional money. That money was left, but he was definitely waiting for council direction on spending any more because it was considered contingency funding.
Okay.
So I think what we're suggesting today is we could split some of it towards this project and some towards the items that our manager of parks had identified, but certainly totally at your discretion.
If we could look at what number, do you have that down as the other one? Thank you. But yes, and I understand what you're saying, but number 18 shows the full $200,000 as being here without having Graham here. I'd be somewhat remiss if I didn't say I don't want to take any of his money away. That if he needs all $200,000 to do, is Graham online, or does our CAO know
My-
If I may, so Jetta and Graham have met to talk about those items, and so obviously, as Jetta says, it's up to council, so we could just continue and spend that 200,000 fairly easily on things. As Graham mentioned, I think he was here for some reason, I can't remember, probably budget. It was things like extending pathways and accessibility connections, lighting, furniture, landscaping. So very easy to spend $200,000 on those kinds of things. And it does make sense to do it now if that's what council wants to see, because we are all, it's like an extension of the work that's already being done. So you don't have to remobilize contractors and things. So that is, you know, the 200,000 is coming back to you for decision. Right now, we didn't recommend using that, but it's an option that council could scale back what Graham would do, and then you would just keep the 100,000 for Beach Fest. But it's happening next year if council gives us that direction. So perhaps just allocating the $100,000, it might be less next year. Beach Fest said they were going to try and provide some support financially. So if council is more comfortable, we could get more of a definitive decision on the 200,000 and then just earmark the 100,000, but we do have to tax for it, or it has to be approved from some fund or some grant. We're not saying you have to pick and choose, but we're giving council that option of whether you wanted to pick and choose.
I think at this time we should just leave 18 as it is, allocating the full 200,000, not have him to try and cut back or do that.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And with the Parksville Beach Festival at the same time, I think I would like to just defer that until 2024 or 2025 rather, because this is just allocation for the planning. The planning of it is $100,000 for it, and I think we could theoretically do that for 25, included in the budget for 25, because that's when we're going to look at the whole thing. I think it's a little jumping ahead of the gate. Is like we like to do with creating a reserve fund for an anticipated need, which we're pretty good at lately, but I don't think in this particular case it's needed. And I think if we need anything, we could take it out of the contingency if we needed something. I already know that for the relocation to the community park for the sand sculpting, staff have proactively including some services that are already being included when they redid the community gathering place. And so that it was with the anticipation of it moving. So I think we've already supplied some monies into that. So I would suggest we vote on 18 right now for the full amount, and then I'll go to the next one. So all those in sorry.
Okay, so just so we were clear, so who moved the 18? The mayor, and then Councillor Grant seconded. So we'll just approve that one right now, but then just back to the one that we're on. What I would suggest is if we want that to be a project that actually happens in 2025, Graham would have to start some of the design and planning this year. And so what we had sort of done is put the 100,000 in there for 2025 to be spent, but it gives him the authority to go ahead and like do some design. So perhaps we could just allocate a small amount for design this year, and then council can decide yes or no on whether you want to go ahead with it in 2025. We would just sort of rebudget it or bring it to you as almost like a new item. But if we put the 5,000 in for Graham, that gives him a little bit of money if he needs to hire a designer or a contractor to check whatever services are there. And then the 100,000 would just come right out, and we would discuss it as a new item next year. If that sounds good.
If I recall, the Growing Communities Fund would qualify for design.
It
Yes.
would. Yeah, it would. So
Okay, so that's fair. So let's
Okay.
take the 18 as the first motion. All those in favor of 18 as such, thank you. That carries unanimous. Going back to number 7, I'd like to make a motion anyways that we assign 5,000 out of the Growing Communities Fund for consideration Parksville Beach Festival relocation. Seconded by Councillor Grenz. All those in favor? Carries unanimous. Thank you. Way to go. Number 8, please.
Okay, number 8 is the council code of conduct review. And this would be $10,000 mostly in legal fees and some staff time. And that could be funded out of property taxes. I did have council contingency here as an alternative as well, but
Now,
Like-
yes, so going back, I believe this council, we already had a council meeting or a decision anyways that we felt that we didn't need a code of conduct in play at this particular time and actually watching. It's a suggestion from the province that we do it. We had that discussion. And I think with the advent that we'd see how this council gels, quite frankly. So we decided that we weren't going to do anything at that particular time. So that's, I remember where we left it. It's back on the table again, I guess, just for reconsideration. And that's what we're here for today. Councillor Martin.
I would like to know how the process works on the code of conduct, how that is, and where the $10,000 comes from. How does that work? We might not have to spend all that money, but we could improve things. Thank you.
CAO Kaler, please.
I can speak to that one. Thanks. So the process would be that, as Jetta mentioned, we would have one of our solicitors meet with council to talk about what you want the code of conduct to include or not include. What are your objectives that would come out of that? And then what we had recommended previously was using, one of our solicitors actually does this. He's the integrity commissioner for some other municipalities and does this as his key thing. And so that would address things like the weaponizing of the code of conduct that was mentioned. $10,000 is really for those legal fees. And what we had talked about before was if there was any left over, that would be put into a reserve in case there's ever the need for an investigation. And so what would happen with that type of a code of conduct, different than our current process, is if somebody made a complaint, it would be completely dealt with outside of the city's realm. I wouldn't know about it. You wouldn't know about, unless you were the person, you wouldn't know about it. It basically puts it to a proper judicial process where the lawyer would investigate based on the merits or say, no, I'm not investigating it because there's no evidence of a code of conduct breach. And then the lawyers recommend the outcome. So it takes it away from, it can't really be politicized because you guys don't even know. So at the moment, our code of conduct was deemed by this council to be satisfactory. And it's on here because some members of council have asked for it to be discussed. And it's been on here for quite some time, so I don't think it's to do with any recent issue or any concern. I think it was just, from my conversations with a few folks, it was just a discussion point. And so there's no obligation. We've met the legal obligation, our legislative obligation from the province. So this is something that is really just at council's discretion.
Comments, Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I do think that there is value in us doing this and having this in place so that when and if and when something does arise where we need some assistance from legal advice or outside folks, that we have something in place. I'm also, though, aware that this would come from council contingency, and that seems to be an amount that's shrinking as we go. So I would certainly like to see this done during our term. As to whether it needs to be on 2024 or could perhaps be deferred to 2025, I'm open to other thoughts around this table.
Councillor Martin.
I think this opportunity to have it non-politicized is a wise thing so that we have the professionals to look after what needs to be done. And as a council and a citizen and looking after how we run things and how we do things with other people, I think it's a wise thing to do. And I think it's part of our society. So that's how I would support that now rather than defer. And where the money comes from, we'll have to figure that out from the professionals. Thank you.
Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mayor. We, as council, heard from, I think Councillor Grenz mentioned the weaponizing of of the code of conduct, and I truly respect his opinion. I think he was bang on. We've seen this happen in other municipalities. We've also seen most municipalities having a code of conduct. I think the provincial representatives, elected officials have a code of conduct. That's what my understanding is, and so do our federal counterparts. To me, it's like cops saying that they don't need rules or laws governing them. So especially after the CEO saying that the political component can be taken out, being anonymous, I support the code of conduct. But the money's got to come from somewhere. So this $10,000, which we don't have in the contingency. Again, I'm watching this running number of the property tax. I'm okay with deferring it for next year and having a look at it again. Thanks.
Councillor Grants?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to clarify, council does have a code of conduct presently. What council does not have is a way of adjudicating disputes under that code of conduct and issuing penalties if they're needed. And my concern last time we discussed this was, as has been mentioned, about weaponization, but also the hope that perhaps because of this provincial legislation requiring code of conduct, that maybe there would be some learnings that have come from other municipalities implementing codes of conduct. It sounds to me like maybe some of those learnings have now come to the fore with legal that has some precedents in other codes of conduct to rely on. The information we're getting from the CAO today is different than what I've heard in previous discussion. So I would be inclined to support some funds for the code of conduct review. I guess the question through to staff is, do we need the full 10,000 this year, and is this going to be a recurring? I think it's a one-time, or could this be kind of spread out over a couple of years?
If I may, so
Go ahead, CAO.
through the mayor. So the 10,000 was based on a discussion that we had with our solicitor at the change of term. So like right before you were elected, and the legislative requirement came forward that we had to review it. And that was for, that included for costs for the solicitor to meet with council. So you would envision they would come meet with you for several hours and talk to council about your objectives, your concerns, the specifics that you think you need as a council. While there is some benefit, I think, of a boilerplate to start with, that's kind of what we have now is we could use that as the base. But that money was based on a conversation with the solicitor of how much time it had taken him to do them with other councils. If this council already kind of knew what it wanted and didn't need to meet with the lawyer and could just like write it yourselves almost, which I wouldn't really recommend myself, but that would be a little bit less. But so that's why we discussed if there was something left over that would be kept. It's a one-time cost of 10,000 as we proposed, and then say there was it only cost 5,000 for the solicitor to come and meet with you, and they could do it pretty quickly. That 5,000 would just get reserved in case there's ever an investigation, because we've had about one every council term. And once you get the lawyers involved and there's some kind of an investigation, it very quickly adds up to more than $10,000. So that would be, part of, it would just go towards a future investigation should there ever be one. And then with our reserves policy that would be coming back to council in the long run, we would have a legal, some amount of legal reserve. So it wouldn't need to be funded separately after this, like after it's done, it would just sort of sit there until you would need. And like I say, it's somewhat rare, but there's usually one issue every council that requires some support from legal. And then the other part of that is that the solicitor would discuss with you who can make complaints, right? Because that's quite important. Some cities say only the CAO can make the complaint, which I do not recommend. And others say that it's only from cities, like an internal, right? So you don't want some citizen to be able to, because it would cost significant amounts. So that's where the legal expertise comes in on really creating that program for complaints. And then I would also recommend that council really not have, like some places allow councils to make some decisions, but that's the politicizing of those concerns. So the cost is really in it, whether if someone makes a complaint, the lawyer has to be involved, or some independent commissioner, right? You pick, it's usually a lawyer. You could pick somebody else.
Yeah, thank you, CAO, Kaler. This is a starting, in my opinion, this is the starting point. If we had a code of conduct put in exactly by the lawyers as suggested anyways, this just becomes, now we will have to have a line item of taxpayer money to pay for legal fees. And it's huge. I'm watching, I don't know if the rest of you will look at the municipal news to see what's happening across Canada with the code of conducts and the amount of claims that are going through. Some councils are putting through claims like 3 and 4 in a year claims, which all have to be adjudicated through a lawyer. And that's huge costs. And some of them, I shake my head at what there is, it's personalities that's coming into it. But they have to be reviewed by the lawyer. And it's huge, the amount. So this is just a line item just to conduct a review. But I'm saying that our legal costs, which, let's be fair, our legal costs are paid by taxpayer funds. So the legal costs to actually do those complaint investigations are monstrous. It's going to drive our legal fees up, and the cities that have it in place now are shaking their heads because the situations that have come up really could have been solved by somebody going out and having lunch, you know, and working out their differences, which is really the better way of doing it without it taxpayer cost. I'm just saying it's a big can of worms we're opening up. I'm not in support of it at this particular time, but I'm going to have to draw this to a close quickly because we are never going to get finished in 1 minute. So I have an appointment shortly after 1 o'clock that I cannot miss. So, Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I would like to also ask our CAO question along the lines that what you just mentioned. Have, in your experience, you heard of municipalities having a code of conduct, spending a lot of monies in legal fees in BC, in your experience? Or is it just 1 or 2 outliers that we see in Vancouver, just people's political personalities not getting along, or any other agendas that they may have?
So if I may, through the mayor, I'm hesitant to talk about other communities because I don't have time to worry about them that specifically, but just reading the news, it's really not the Lower Mainland. Like, there's many issues. But as I say, for us, in my experience in Parksville for 13 years, which is quite a few councils, I guess, there's one issue kind of every year or every term that I can think of. And mostly, I would say they're more minor than what you hear about in the news. And I do agree with the mayor that a lot of it is a misunderstanding, that if the mayor or a councillor could get a support person also on council to help, like, a lot of it gets sorted out. I think deferring it to perhaps the last year of term might not be such a bad idea, because then in a way you get a neutral, like, you're almost creating the rules for the next group. So it's sometimes a little bit more neutral when that happens. And again, there would be a few more years of experience. But yeah, we've already kind of talked about it. I don't really have new information to share from when we talked about it with council. Like I say, we've met the legislative requirement. We have a code of conduct. And this is here not from staff, but because a number of councillors asked for it to be put here. So not really mine to speak to.
I'm suggesting we take this off the agenda for right now and just defer it for a later decision. We're going to get hung up on it, guys, here. So I say just defer this, if I may. Thank you, Councillor Gore. So that's just to defer it at this point. Let's go on to number 9, please. Call the vote, Chair. All to defer. Those opposed? Okay. Those objecting are Councillor Martin and Councillor Beal. Thanks. So it's deferred. Number 9. Yes, Jella?
If I could interject for a minute, just because we are at noon. What I would suggest, if we just look quickly back at our original schedule, given we've got quite a lot to go through, and it seems unlikely we'll get through that before other people have commitments this afternoon, is we did have today and February 12th as days for bringing cumulative analysis to you. And so I would suggest perhaps we need to take the next sections of this and either move to February 12th or an earlier meeting if it could be worked out. But in any case, it would just leave us with that February 21, March 4th readings and adoption of the bylaw. Having decisions today, obviously the sooner the better, and we move things along, but I think there's still a lot to cover here. So at your discretion, obviously, I'm not aware of what people's commitments are, but we did only commit to being here till noon.
Right.
Yeah.
So you suggest we can carry on with the work list here type of thing for now, and then pick up on the last part of your presentation at a future meeting on,
I'm saying, I think probably whether or not you want to get to the bottom of the council requested items and leave the rest of the list for another meeting, because there's still quite a lot to go through here. But if council wants to blast through that, that also works, but I'm just suggesting as an alternative. Yeah, we could move to consider the FTE positions.
Okay, well, I can go to 12:30.
Okay,
I can go to 12:30 anyways, for sure. So I would
Great.
say, okay, so let's look at number 9 then, Jetta. Yeah, thank you. And then we'll look at, we'll get to the bottom of the section and then look at positions.
oh, yes, there are. We've got some misnumbering. Sorry about that.
8 and 2 number 8.
Okay, so
8989.
So the next item is the grant to PDBA for parking, and that was an item that was discussed early on in the financial plan. The amount that was proposed was $3,000. And I believe that the PDBA rents a lot currently, and it was a notional amount towards the cost of that.
Yes, and as background anyways, for that anyways, what we did is we had the meeting with the PDBA where we identified where we had parking tax revenue that we had sitting in a parking tax revenue fund, I guess. And it was suggested at that time that we could take that amount and pay that not from taxpayer tax dollars, but actually out of parking tax fund. And this was not a line item. This was a one-time opportunity. Right. Okay, thank you. Not property. No, we already have sufficient funds in the property, the parking fund.
So
Yes.
just to clarify, that was not my understanding. My understanding was it would be coming out of current revenue and not out of, because the parking reserve is for the creation of downtown parking.
Sorry, yeah, out of revenue.
Out of
Yeah,
the ticket
yeah,
revenue?
yeah, sorry, yeah, ticket revenue, yes.
Right. So at the end of the day, though, that ticket revenue funds various things currently. So either we're going to increase the rate of the ticket revenue to offset this so that it's still balanced, or property tax revenue would fund the difference as to what's not funded by ticket revenue. So,
Under the fact that it's revenue.
right. So there's still going to be an increase in our property taxes if we go ahead with this. Because right now in our general fund, we have the ticket revenue, we have the property taxes. It's all balanced for that. So if all of a sudden you remove some ticket revenue, you need to supplement with property taxes. Does everyone understand that?
Yeah, and yeah, I thought this was a simple solution anyways to help out the PDBA for actually paying the parking. But yeah, considering the fact that it actually goes into revenue, that it's not actually in the ticket fund, it's actually going to revenue. So it's actually funding other services, as in the BCOs writing the tickets is part of it as well. So it's not quite as easy as a slam dunk as I had hoped.
Right. If I made the ticket revenue essentially is part of what funds the bylaw function.
Right. Yeah.
With the balance coming from property taxes, everybody contributes to that function, but the ticket revenue is part of additional user fees, which is a positive thing in municipalities where we can find revenue sources like that. But of course, that's defined by our fees and charges bylaw.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, it was just a suggestion at that time. Councillor Beal?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just curious, do we have a timeline for when the additional parking will be completed beside the fire hall? Because that will in fact provide additional parking for the downtown area. And I'm just thinking about how that could impact this decision. This $3,000 would help the PDBA and help downtown parking up to and including what date is this considered for the year? And also knowing that we did get application coming forth for the particular property where that parking is at the present. So I think all of those play a role in our decision here, but
Yeah.
when will the new parking area be finished?
To answer the part of the question, Councillor Beal, the amount was like 3,000. It was like for 6 months, it was paying half. In 6 months, it would carry, we're paying half of the current parking situation they have on McCarter. That was the goal there. As far as the parking going at the fire hall, it's
If I may, through the mayor, so it is scheduled for this year, and we just issued, council just issued the development permit
Right.
recently. So staff are working on it, but I would say it's imminent in the next few months, but I don't have a definitive date.
So I'm going to understanding now it's not an easy out of slam dunk. I'm going to ask to delete this. If Councillor Gore seconds it. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Reluctantly. There we go. Thank you. Go ahead, Jetta, on the second number 8.
Right. So the second item related to the PDBA as well is the lighting project, which is, you know, more of a capital project in terms of having a 3-year plan related to downtown lighting. And there would be incremental operating costs that aren't identified here once that was in place. But I think the idea was to start that in 2025. So really wanting to get this, if council wants to proceed with that, into the 5-year financial plan and identify a funding source for that as well.
My own thoughts were on this is that it would actually be deferred anyways to 2025 because part of our strategic plan was the vibrancy and this was what was playing into it. But what is also is we have the ongoing master transportation plan. We were I think in about the second phase on Let's Talk Parksville. It's a very good report anyways of where we are on that, which you're probably all aware of. So I don't think we have to consider for 2024. I think it's 2025. At this particular time, no funding should be allocated. We have a whole bunch of things to do before we even get to that. So I don't think it's fair to allocate at this time funding in 2024. This is my own feeling.
Okay, if I may, I think what we're looking at is, given it's a 5-year financial plan, as well as the work plan that our CAO was discussing earlier, is does council wish to placehold it in 2025 so that it's there and left on the list, but nothing would be done in 2024, including any funding towards it? Or do you want to take it off the list completely, just for both the work plan and the financial plan, whether we just put it into 2025 for now?
Councillor Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was thinking that's a possibility, wouldn't it be, if we did defer it, but look at the Growing Communities Fund? I mean, would that qualify? Because it seems like it would be
Possibly.
I mean, a way to think of, I mean, you have to add up our little asks, add up to a total. There's over $2 million sitting, sitting there.
Yeah.
So
Lighting, sidewalks, curbing and lighting is
yes,
a
it's
specific
really in that
category.
category.
So
And it would be,
depending
to
on the
know-
nature of it, it probably
Yeah.
could be
My-
considered part of that.
my thought would be really helpful for the PDBA to know that we do support that and that there is funding for it and that we have to use it up in a certain time because it's 5 years, right? And so there you go on that one. Thank you.
Or if I may, just to provide a little bit of background on that. So we do currently have it in there to start in 2025. And the discussions and the report from staff that went to the previous council was that about 100,000 per year, so it would be a multi-year plan, would be needed to do what's being asked. So it's things like, there's a few different types of lighting, but like the banners, and we shared the report with council. When we were talking with the PDBA at that time, they said they would provide an amount to that project, not a huge amount, but a big amount for them. So them knowing in advance would be helpful, so they could fundraise or allocate the funds. And we also did discuss having support from other groups like the chamber or others that could contribute. But the 300,000 was for the city's cost of 100,000 for 3 years in a row. And so, as Jetta mentioned, because we have a 5-year plan, if that's something that council is committed to doing, we should be putting it in the plan now and funding it now. And if it's not, if you're not sure, or it's not something you want to do, then it comes off. And that's your message to the PDBA, that they do not have any approval in principle to work with us on this project. So it's really kind of a best practice. If that's something you want in the plan for the 5 years, then we should be putting the money in the budget for it. And if it's not, or you're not sure, then it should just come right off. And we would again kind of reintroduce it or re-budget it in 2025.
There.
So this is actually funded already, is that? Because it's showing,
It's showing 300,000, but you'll see it's 0% property tax increase because it's identified for 2025. So it's in the
Yes.
column that is 25
Yeah.
to 28.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Mhm.
fine, there's placeholding then. So
Yeah, and then the
that's good.
option, as Jetta mentioned, we could look at grant, so offsetting it with
Yeah.
grant. But it should be, if council wants
Give me
to
a motion.
pursue it, it should be in the 5-year plan.
Okay.
Even though it doesn't start until next year.
Okay, we'll take a motion, then we can still have comments. Motion, Councilor Gore.
Yeah, just placeholder $100,000, yeah, for next year.
I'll second that. Discussion? Councilor Bill? Yeah, do you have?
Yes, I did. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I was just noting that I don't think we have to 100% decide where this money is exactly coming from at this point. And I saw very clearly that there's nothing for 2024. And yes, that we talked about deferring this, but I absolutely want to support this so that we can signal to the PDBA that we are serious about wanting to support their efforts and to support the growing vibrancy in our downtown.
Thank you. All those in,
If
any
I
further
may-
questions? Sorry.
I was going to say, could we clarify, is it 100 for 3 years?
3 years.
Yes, thank you.
3 years. I believe that is the intent of the motion. Yes. Further questions before calling the vote? All those in favor? Carries unanimous. Thank you. I guess we're on to the second, number 9.
Yes. So the final item under this council section is the Pioneer Neighborhood Playground, which we had a delegation as well as discussion amongst council. Wanting to look out again, this would be a 2025 possible item, and putting a placeholder there with an estimate of about $100,000 of capital cost, with a suggestion that the Growing Community Fund could be used for this. It's currently in the capital plan, but funded from property taxes. And there's also an estimate of just ongoing maintenance and inspection related to that. So that's the 150, but the capital cost of 100 would go into the 2025 year with council's approval, with Growing Communities Fund versus property taxes.
Councilor Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And my understanding, I was able to attend a meeting with Graham Giddon and also some people from the neighborhood who were involved with this project. And that suggested budget was based on, like the final design has not been decided upon at all. This could be something much smaller. There were questions about what kind of surfacing. So nothing has actually been decided. I know that originally the people who were involved with it finally reached out to someone who did playground design, and that's what they came up with. But these are not necessarily people who have expertise in that area and what's the right fit for the playground and how much that would cost. Because talking with Mr. Giddon, he seemed to think that it would be considerably less than this, and that there are also different options for surfacing that allow for some accessibility, not necessarily the same kind of level that one has in the community park, or that you can access parts of it and not others. He also did note some issues maybe in the park that had nothing to do with the playground project, but that were just to do with the drainage area, which the city had put in place, and mentioned that some of those things could be all tied in together at that time.
Do
So
I hear a motion?
oh, yes, sorry. Yes, I'll move to approve this, that it be deferred, and that further that we look at the Growing Communities Fund for covering this. I think it fits with recreation and other
Seconded
strategies.
by Councillor Martin. Okay.
Clarification from the CAO, I think.
Oh, I can't, sorry.
Oh, you got it?
You okay?
No, sorry, I think we're fine as long as we're going with the same amount, because the 100,000 is the refined amount from staff, from Graham. Based on the discussions, it was initially 140,000 that staff had said. So I think we're fine as long as your motion is basically as is. So the 100,000 from growing community and the 50 operating, we're good.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. That was it. Jetta, you were identifying perhaps some staffing positions. If you just go to the number and we can talk about them right now.
Great. So this is the, the 14, 15, 16 or whatever number it might be. Looking at 3 positions, 3 FTEs were brought to council previously for discussion. The first being a human resources staff member for 1 FTE. The amounts that are shown in the chart are with respect to just estimating when those might get to be hired, would be about 3/4 of a year in 2024 and then a full FTE in 2025. And the finance position would be a half year in 2024 and full going forward. The administrative staff member and the finance member are both kind of multi-department support positions. And so just reflecting that for your information, that they aren't necessarily just strictly those departments. The amounts are shown there. It would be about a 1.3% property taxes for all 3 positions in 2024. Annualized, it's about a 2% increase. One further note is some of this, that is showing the full property tax. We do have some sharing of costs across our water and sewer fund as well, which for those multi-department pieces as well would be, there would be some cost recovery from those departments or those funds as well.
Okay, looking for council direction here. Do we want to consider all 3 individually or separate? Okay, thank you. Okay, look at number 14, human resources staff, 1 full-time equivalent, 3/4 of a year in 20. Oh, yes, sorry, the balance of the year for 2024. Here we go. Discussion. Councilor Gore.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to our CAO. Does these amounts include the benefits as well, or just wages, benefits? Okay, and they have, so you also calculated the recent QP agreement, whatever will happen, and the wage, okay, the wage increase. Okay, thank you.
Is your hand up? Go ahead, Councilor Martin.
On these 3, I know we're just doing the first one, but we had an events coordinator or something that was presented to us. Is it involved in one of these 3?
If I may, council already gave direction to go ahead with that and gave
Okay.
approval for
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
So that's already included.
Thank you.
She's at her desk today,
Okay, good.
inside. I saw her on the way by. Okay. Any other discussion on this? Anybody want to put a motion on the floor to accept position number 14? Let's just keep it totally non-political, no names. Number 14. Yes, Councilor Beal.
You asked if anyone would like to put a motion
Are
forward?
You putting a motion for?
Yes, thank
Yes, okay, thank you. Moved by Councilor Beal. Do I have a seconder? Councilor Wood. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Oh, sorry, Joel, was that voting or discussion?
I do have a
Go
maybe
ahead.
question
Yeah,
about all
yes.
three of these positions. I might need a little memory jogging. As we did already approve the, it's great to see that we've got someone starting today. Maybe the quick Coles notes, I think we had a presentation on this. Yeah, and at that time, we didn't approve these positions. So maybe just the Coles notes would be great.
Sure, if I may.
Yes,
through
go
the
ahead.
mayor. So these items are typically brought to council and closed. And so council, there were requests for some positions that council did not advance to budget discussions. And so these three positions are essentially forwarded from that meeting. And there were justifications provided to council in that meeting. And so these three were, I guess, approved in principle to be reviewed at budget.
Thank you for that clarification. Memory jogging, yes, thank you.
Okay, so just before we call the question here on number 14, we're looking at a property tax increase. 0.53, 0.36 if we did them all, 0.53, 0.42, which would be, I'm just looking for the addition of the 1.31. So if we were to take all three of these positions, council, it will equal a 1.31% tax increase. Correct in mine. Am I correct in your math? That's why I'm looking at the big chart. Yes, so everybody is aware. So that we're just talking about number 14 right now, which would be a 0.53%. Any further discussion on number 14? Councillor Gore?
Thank you, Mayor. And before we start voting, I just wanted to ask our CAO, is there a possibility that perhaps you, and there is some appetite in the organization through you might know that we look at these again, perhaps in the next fiscal year, when the projection is for the property taxes to be lower to start with this 1.3, and with my running number that I have is 6.6. We are looking at close to 8% increase if we approve these. I know these are positions that are needed. I know staff needs that support. I'm just wanting to get the word from you if at all possible for us to defer this to next fiscal and we have this discussed again.
If I may, through council, to Councillor Gore, or sorry, through the mayor to Councillor Gore. So as we discussed, staff, or I guess at this point, after talking with staff, believe these are critical positions to maintain the level of service. As we have discussed, I think at length, there are more people, more calls for service, more of everything. And we were very cognizant of, instead of having perhaps one FTE in each department for admin support, we're looking at more creative ways of having a floating position, which is number 15, I think. And then the other position is also supporting all of our corporate initiatives in several departments. And without those positions, our level of service would have to be reduced. So these are, in my opinion, critical positions to maintain the current operations that we're seeing. And also, I would perhaps mention that many of our counterparts will be looking at higher tax increases. And so I think there's an effort as well to keep tax increases as low as possible. And that's reflected in basically one spending package coming before council. Normally there would be, dozens. And so staff are very aware that we have no capacity for bringing spending packages to you to do things. So we didn't bring any. And these are the three, basically the minimum. As I mentioned, there were other positions that council didn't feel comfortable supporting. So that's my position, is that we need these positions.
Thank you for that. If I just may comment here first, as I understand it, these positions, before they come to us anyways, this staff doesn't ask for what they don't need. And so I respect that. I also respect their ingenious way of getting people to be multi-department, and number 15 and number 16 will be multi-department lies anyways as a floating staff member, recognizing the minimum impact on the taxpayer. And also the fact is that some of us are participating in the RDN budget talks right now, where they have an immense amount of staff increases as well, just growing needs, growing services. So I would be supporting all three of these, even though I know we're only talking number 14 right now. So I believe that we have to do it. We have to bite the bullet, and well, let's just do it. So that's my feeling. Councillor Gore, you had another comment?
I just wanted to add that I could possibly support the multi-department positions. I will likely not support number 14. Does that mean that service levels need to be cut? I perhaps would be interested in looking at staff come before council, like where are the services that can be cut? Just kind of being cognizant of our demographic, seeing, families, young families trying to survive, and the seniors on fixed income, which represent a high proportion of residents here in Parksville. The renters seeing their rents go up because, again, the landowners cannot afford the property taxes and all the increases what we're seeing, whether it's groceries or anything, fuel, everything. So if number 14 could be deferred, come back to us next year, I could possibly look at it then. And we support 15, 16 now to alleviate the.
We're talking number 14 right now.
Yes, I was just gonna mention.
Thank
that.
you.
Thanks.
Okay. The motion is on the floor.
Excuse me, if I could add to that,
Yes.
just if you recall from our presentation last week, HR is a corporate service, right? So I don't want this to be misleading in any way in that those admin and finance staff are working with a lot of different departments. HR supports the whole organization. And if you recall, we had some charts showing how many resumes they were reviewing and things like that. So I think if you recall those metrics related to the increase in volume that Human Resources has been dealing with corporate wide, just because they're not moving department to department, I think I just don't want this to be misleading in any way just by adding multi-department to those other two. And I believe the CAO also has something to add on that.
If I may.
CEO Kaler.
Thank you. And if I may just remind council, this is in support of a lot of legislative changes as well. And so the Accessibility Committee has made some recommendations to our hiring practices and our internal supports for folks that might need some accommodations. We have an ongoing program to support our staff, if there are injuries or illnesses, or we have safety committee. Like, this would be supporting every employee that works here and every employee that could work here. So I think that to speak to the level of service, those are the types of things that we would not be able to do. So it would be slower to hire. It would be slower to support staff on any number of items. And right now we really have just the manager doing that, which isn't really the most efficient. And that would allow the manager to focus on things like labor relations, OH&S, occupational health and safety at the policy level, plus another suite of policies that we think are somewhat outdated in our HR and employee wellness department. So that we did discuss this with council and close, but just for the benefit of the public. Again, we believe that all of these positions are needed now, and of course it is council's discretion, and if they don't get approved, we will have to find out what goes off the table for the years that they're not approved.
Thank you. I'm going to call the question on number 14. All those in favor of this petition? That is, and those opposed? That is opposed by Councillor Gore. Thank you. Can we just go to number 15? I'd like to move the position of number 15, favor of supporting this motion. Second by Councillor Wood. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Number 16, I would like to move this position for support. Second by Councillor Wood. All those in favor? Thank you. That is 3 out of 3. Councillor Gore opposed, number 14 only. Thank you. I know we're getting to the witching hour here, but there's one other thing, since we just approved a 1.31% tax increase there, folks. One that concerns me is number 17, the maintenance van that was introduced of late. Anyways, I would like to make a decision on this today if we could. Jetta, if you could give us background on the number 17.
Yes, thank you. So if you recall, what the scenario was here is that we've got a growing facilities staff as a result of extra facilities added to their portfolio over the last couple of years. And we have only 3 vehicles, one of which is a garbage can amongst 5 staff. And so it leads to a lot of inefficiencies, both just in terms of them having to share vehicles to get to facilities, but as well as their pickup trucks, and they don't allow for the storage of the cleaning supplies and equipment that they use. And so it's a matter of loading it up each morning and unloading it at the end of the day. So a maintenance van would allow for efficiency in that the equipment and supplies that they need could be stored and kept in those vehicles or that vehicle overnight. And the operating cost annually is estimated at about $7,100. And so that would be the incremental amount going forward in addition to the capital cost. It would then roll into the equipment replacement reserve and be funded out of that through charging out to the various facilities that are served by our facilities custodial staff.
Thank you. Comments? Councillor Grant. Yes, question? Okay. I got Councillor Grant first. I'll go to you.
You got good eyeballs.
Yeah, peripheral. Councillor Grant first, and then Councillor Martin.
Thank you for the reminder on this explanation, maybe through to staff. If this is allowing for more efficiency with staff, then do we see potentially a corresponding increase in service, so to speak? Or like, how does that work?
If I may, through the mayor, I think what we're really looking at is increased demand for their hours. So we're trying to get some efficiencies by adding some tools that may help those hours. For example, we're needing to add supplies and hours to the new washroom building this year. And we're trying to look at, okay, can we be more efficient by, okay, we don't need to share vehicles and travel time going to one or another. Can we find some hours that way? Or are there other facilities that we can be more efficient through the use of that? So yes, there's an extra service level because we have a new building, we have a new washroom building, and we have a new outdoor theater. So it's a little bit plus and minus on their department in looking at those things. Yeah.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is it possible, and I understand these, what you've explained for sure, Jenna, but it's lots more happening, that we wouldn't have to have the latest and greatest vehicle. Could we get something that would be used, that every one of us have bought used cars and we're all taxpayers? And so if it's going to make more efficiency, maybe it would be more practical to have some, on Vancouver Island, there's a lot of used vehicles that don't really get the mileage that they do other places. So that's just my thought on being careful with our funds. Thank you.
Through the mayor, thank you for that question. Yes, absolutely. I think this would be the upper limit. This is a quote on a new maintenance van, but our new purchasing policy does allow for the purchase of used vehicles. And so it is something that our fleet folks would look at. And if that was part of council's direction, then certainly that could be incorporated as part of your resolution, that up to that amount with consideration of a used vehicle as well. So yes, that is something that we look at and can look at as part of our purchasing policy now.
Councillor Gore.
Thanks, Mayor. Could this be funded through the capital reserves or other grants?
I don't think it meets, the grants are typically more infrastructure related. And yes, I guess at council's discretion, the capital reserve could be used for that because there are unallocated funds in capital reserve. I think the intent mostly of council's contributions to capital reserve has been related to our infrastructure. And then it typically with vehicles, we have had an additional property tax increase to purchase the vehicle to recognize that increased level of service, and then it gets incorporated into our equipment reserve, and any subsequent replacements are handled that way through that charge out rate. So that's historically what's been done.
Am I missing the purchase cost of the van? No,
So
that's the estimated cost savings.
if I may, the actual cost is 85,000,
yeah.
and there's an estimated operating cost of $7,100.
That
So
includes-
that's
the
the
breakdown.
two numbers there.
And-
And then 25 to 28 is the 7,100 times 4.
Right,
Yeah.
and that makes sense.
Mhm.
Okay, that's insurance included.
Right,
Right.
exactly, yeah, and fuel and
Okay.
all those things. So if the purchase cost ended up being lower, then that property tax increase could be lower, but we won't know that.
So do I hear a motion from anyone for the purchase of the maintenance van? You want to move?
Thanks, Mayor. I would move that if we use the capital reserves for the purchase of the van. And then the additional operations would be from the general revenue, I guess.
It would still equal a 0.5% property tax increase.
No,
Yes.
no, because we're using the reserves purchase.
So if I may, have a couple of points. One is I just want to be sure to check back to our establishment bylaw related to the capital reserve, just to be sure on that. But if we were able to fund it from capital reserves, then the only incremental amount would be the 7,100, which would be about 0.03% or something like that as the operating cost in the year. Because we would use that capital reserve funding instead of property taxes.
Capital reserve funding, we can do it just like that. We can take the,
Well, that's what I want to confirm. Like I say, historically, it's been infrastructure type items, not vehicles.
that was my point. I never understood that it could actually do that, or else I would have said do the snow blower from the capital reserve funds.
Right.
You know what I'm
So-
saying?
Oh, absolutely, which is why I would want to check back to our establishment bylaw if it's being proposed by council, because that hasn't been done in the past.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would have thought that would have been suggested before we were told it's going to be 0.5% increase. Yeah.
No.
If I may, through the mayor, I can't remember who asked the question, maybe Councillor Gore, but we don't normally fund vehicles through the capital reserve. It's normally for big purchases, big infrastructure related purchases. So we're just going to check the bylaw. But just to confirm, what happens when we buy a new vehicle, it will then become part of the equipment reserve so that the next time it needs to be replaced, it would come out of that reserve. But it's a new item, so it's not already accounted
Right.
for in that reserve. So we'll just have to double check the wording because you're required by law to say what you'll use that reserve fund for. So we just want to make sure we weren't too specific and said infrastructure, because then we probably wouldn't be able to use it. But if we were more generic, then we might be able to.
My understanding of the capital reserve fund is exactly that. You have an established fleet and you know that you have a capital reserve fund for replacement of that fleet. And so, but this is not in that fleet. I don't see how we could take money out of that capital reserve fund to pay for a brand new acquisition that's going to add to it.
Exactly. So
I don't,
if it's
I-
purchased,
yes.
it would then become part of that fund
Yes,
moving
yes, once
forward.
it's purchased, but
The equipment fund, but we also have a capital reserve fund, which I think is what Councillor Gore was referring to. So we have two different reserves there. And we're trying to find the wording of the bylaw for the capital reserve. Because in our mind, we probably said infrastructure. So we'll just have to double check and see.
never heard. Reserve or.
It's still a capital asset, right? It becomes a capital asset.
Yeah, but it's.
So if I may, Mayor, perhaps to make life easier for council and the staff, like perhaps they can come back to us what other options are to fund this. And at that time, we can vote, other than property taxes, what other options are.
Okay, so I don't see any motion on the floor to consider paying it for property taxes. Nobody's willing to put that through. So at this particular time, we only had a partial motion,
I'll make
which
a
wasn't seconded. So at this time, I would like to defer until we get proper alternate sources of funding for this other than a property tax increase. Okay, so then that was seconded by Councillor Gore, deferring, and I'll make that motion. All those in favor? Thank you. That's a question mark. So is there anything else critical? We've gone past my little, I'm just gonna go right to my appointment, so.
If I may suggest, if we are planning on stopping the decision-making on this list, there is a time-sensitive item for the UBCM summit that we need.
Oh, yeah,
council approval
that's
for.
on, yeah, sorry, that's over here. So let me. Thank you for that, council. That was fun as always, and budgets are never fun. They're tough. Anyways, a lot of tough decision making, so there are no winners and losers. They're just players in the game. So we have one notice of a motion on the agenda that we'd like to talk about right now. The notice of motion is from myself regarding the UBCM Housing Summit. Do I have a mover or a seconder for the recommendation that funding in the amount of $3,500 be approved from council contingency to cover the registration, accommodation, and travel costs for Mayor O'Brien and Councillor Wood to attend the UBCM Housing Summit in Vancouver, BC on February 13th and 14th, 2024. I need a mover or seconder, then I can give you more background. Moved by Councillor Beal, second by Councillor Wood. So the UBCM Housing Summit is a one-off summit that's been presented to us to council, and is to deal with the legislative changes all brought forward in November and December 23. And so we're all aware of that. We spent a lot of time talking about it. The summit is being held in Vancouver. It's able to be attended via live and in person for all municipalities, or virtual as well, in case there's an amendment here coming. And so to give background, the $3,500 being approved, we're going on the high side, of course, because, well, for myself, I would be going over and attending. I've been actually asked to be a presenter on the panel. So as on the mayor's panel for one of the items on the agenda, short-term rentals, for those that want to know. So I've been asked to be as a presenter. Councillor Wood's part of his coverage for expenses would be covered by UBM, since he is a UBCM, since he is a member at large. And so that would be covered at that time. So we're looking for a mover or seconder, or maybe someone to consider an alternate motion at this time, or an adjustment. Yes. Councillor Beal.
Thank you.
Do you want to have a discussion on the whole thing first? Okay. Okay, yeah, that's right. Okay, so the motion is here. Okay, yeah, okay. Is there any further discussion at this point? Councillor Gore?
Thank you, Mayor, and I want to thank Councillor Wood for sharing that information with the rest of the council. My question, you kind of partly answered in your background, was there is an option to attend virtually. And since we are going over the budget, trying to save every penny we can for the taxpayers, I do understand this comes from the council contingency. $3,500, it says the amount, or is it up to 3,500? Because there will be, you know, as you said, Councillor Wood, expenses would be covered by UBCM for him being a director at large. And looking at the agenda for this summit, it's quite interesting. And thank you again for stepping up and representing our community. But I do understand there's interest from other council members who would also like to attend either virtually. Personally, I think I could attend one day. So I'm trying to get an answer from you, like, can we bring this cost down so there's a possibility of other council members also attending? And if virtually is an option, I guess that could also accommodate other council members. Thanks.
Right. Comment by Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as Councillor Gore alluded to, there may be other councillors who would like to attend. And in fact, I would like to attend. I wanted to attend virtually. I did not realize at the time that it would be possible to bring it to this particular meeting since it was focused on budget, and thought the deadline would be passed. But so perhaps I will wait for further discussion before bringing forth an amendment. But in fact, heads up that I would like to increase this amount by $300 so that I could attend this event virtually.
Right. And Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. As a UBCM director at large, they're only covering my accommodation, which is actually the expensive part.
Yeah.
Which is great. We still have to pick up my registration and travel, but the kind of the majority of my travel via accommodation is paid for by the UBCM Small Communities Travel Fund.
Thank you. And Councillor Martin.
Yes, I think that'd be very fruitful for us as this council with our circumstance. And I wouldn't mind being a virtual member on this too. More money. There's more of us. Yeah.
Councillor Grants.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to council. That I think this is a critically important issue that this council is struggling with, as we've heard already from CAO today, around the provincial offloading that we're seeing on municipalities, that and our strategic priority of advocacy, that this is a great opportunity for a strong voice here on the behalf of the city. So I look forward to supporting this and supporting the good work that will be done. And I'm very interested in this topic as well, as we all are. So, but I'm mindful of the cost. So I would feel like we're in good hands with the mayor and Councillor Wood attending. And hopefully there's a little bit in the wiggle room in this motion that would allow for other council members to attend virtually, if that's budget-wise possible.
If I may pose a question to our CAO, in the past, when we've had one-offs like this is a unique summit that's been conducted, we've actually picked up the registration and held it in the boardroom, held the board, where other councils we've attended in group in the boardroom off of the admin office there, where other council members that wish to attend could attend at the same time. As at that venue is actually worked out rather good because it was all of the other council members there. Is that a possibility, CAO Keller?
Technically speaking, that you are supposed to register as an individual, but I will not speak to what would happen if another person were to walk past the office and catch what was being presented on a shared monitor.
Well, and really, in speaking to this, I don't think UBCM is looking at this as a money-making venture, and that they have offered it virtually, as they said in the preamble, that it was to accommodate those like that have a lot of travel involved. You know, like you're in Houston, BC, it's going to be expensive to get down to Vancouver. So fair be it for that. But to me, I think that is truly in the spirit of the UBCM, who they're representing us, to get more information to more of our municipal members. I would, I would accept certainly an amendment to this motion anyways, to include for participation by other councillor members that are interested to be paid for by contingency, to either paid for as singularly or collectively through the boardroom if in that circumstance. Seconded by Councillor Gore. Discussion, Councillor Wood.
I'm wearing a couple of hats here. It is expensive to put something on virtually, and so they are trying to recover costs with that. I just will mention that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Pyle.
Could I just have some clarification? So I mean, I had looked this up and looked at the program and so on and so forth. I was definitely interested in attending and would like to register. As I understand your motion, then I will be obliged to have, bring my computer or whatever and have this in the boardroom. Is that my understanding of what would happen?
No, you would not need your computer in the boardroom. In the boardroom, it's done on the unit, the CPU that's already there, and it's on the big screen. It is what it would be. Is that okay?
But nonetheless, if I'm to attend virtually, then I'm obliged to attend this here and break up my day in additional ways. Is that my understanding?
If I may, this is somewhat awkward in that, as I mentioned, if you would like to attend the item here, there is a room available that more than one person may overhear what's being presented. However, you are supposed to register as a person and pay the fees. And so council can decide whether they authorize 3,800, which is the 35 plus.
Thank you for that clarification. I think that other bit could be just a conversation later on to sort out a few details. So thank you.
Yeah. All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, unless there's anything further, I'm going to ask for adjournment at this time. If I could request a mover or seconder, moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? Thank you.